Xiang Yu's eyes widened as the system panel floated in front of him. Professions. Cook, 4th grade, 20 of 600. Talisman maker, 9th grade, 10 out of 100. Appraiser, 9th grade, 2 out of 100. Talisman maker didn't surprise him. He'd already drawn a talisman with his own hands, so the system recognizing it made sense. But appraiser? That one hit him out of nowhere. He hadn't deliberately trained it. He hadn't even tried. Then it clicked. Earlier, when he had narrowed his chi sense and examined the pill and talismans down to the tiniest detail, he'd been appraising without realizing it. The system simply counted the action and turned it into a profession. At 9th grade, appraiser was still crude. It could only spit out basic names. Still, that alone was valuable. If he nurtured it, he could eventually read deeper properties, hidden flaws, real grades, and maybe most importantly, spot the old monsters pretending to be harmless. He dismissed the interface and sat down, back against cold stone. He breathed slowly, guiding his energy into a steady rhythm, forcing his heartbeat to settle. Minutes passed. His thoughts stopped racing, and reality came back into focus. This hiding spot was only a pause, not a solution. If those intruders searched the pavilion thoroughly, they'd find him sooner or later. He needed an exit, or he needed to remove the core formation cultivator and the people with him. Xiang Yu looked around the cramped cave. It was barely wide enough to sit comfortably, about a meter across, maybe 3 meters deep. The ceiling was so low he couldn't even stand straight. Then his gaze caught something at the back wall. He triggered appraiser again. Soft rock. He'd been spamming appraisal nonstop to farm experience. It cost almost nothing, so why not squeeze every drop out of it? The label made him curious. Soft rock, in a place like this? He rose into a hunched crouch and moved closer, careful not to scrape the stone or make noise. Something about the wall felt wrong, like it didn't belong. He pressed his palm against it. Then he pushed his chi sense into the stone. There was space behind it. A hollow. His breathing stalled for a beat. He applied gentle pressure, and the rock crumbled away like dry clay, peeling open without resistance. The opening revealed a second cavern. A bigger one. And the moment he saw it, his throat went dry. Chi was so dense inside that it condensed into colored mist, drifting in slow, lazy currents. Massive flowers bloomed like they'd been fed by heaven itself. Thick vegetation carpeted the ground, rich and unreal, colors so vivid they almost hurt the eyes. At the center sat a spring, roughly 5 meters across. The water wasn't clear. It rippled with strange shifting hues, like light had been dissolved into it. And rising from the middle of that spring was an enormous tree. Xiang Yu didn't hesitate. He slipped through the opening. The instant he crossed into the hidden cavern, spiritual chi wrapped around him like warm fog. It sank into his skin, flowed into his meridians, and made his whole body tingle. This place was leagues beyond anything outside. He activated appraiser again, sweeping the vegetation. Herb times 22. Every plant here was a medicinal herb. Not weeds, not ordinary grass, but genuine spiritual ingredients, and high-level ones at that. They'd clearly been nurtured by this environment for a long time. He moved toward the spring, step by step, eyes locked on that towering tree. Part of him wondered if his master knew this place existed, or if it had been hidden even from the sect. When he got close enough, he focused appraiser on the tree. Spirit vein. Xiang Yu froze. A spirit vein, he whispered. Spirit veins weren't common treasures. They were the kind of thing sects fought wars over. Natural convergences where the earth itself carried concentrated chi, feeding a region until it became a cultivation paradise. That explained everything. The mist. The herbs. The unnatural abundance. And it also explained the danger. If outsiders discovered this, the Azure Cloud sect wouldn't just face the Wuming cult. They'd face everyone. Any sect, any rogue expert, any greedy powerhouse would come like vultures. Xiang Yu backed away to the entrance. Quietly, carefully, he rolled a heavy stone into place and sealed the opening. He couldn't risk someone stumbling into this realm by accident. Only after the entrance was secure did he return toward the center. Even surrounded by dense chi, He noticed something odd. For his current cultivation, this qi wasn't overwhelmingly helpful. Strong, yes, but not life-changing. Compared to cultivating with spirit food, the boost here felt moderate. Still, the value of a spirit vein wasn't just cultivation. It was cultivation resources. Herbs. If he ever pushed into pill refining seriously, this place could become his private garden for rare ingredients. A stable supply. No risky expeditions. No paying impossible prices. But first, he had to survive. He sat down at a safe distance from the spring, steadied his breathing, and pulled a stack of blank talisman paper from his spatial ring. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. At my level, talismans are the only thing that can threaten a core formation expert, he murmured. And now I'm a 9th grade talisman maker. His smile sharpened into something darker. So, what of your core formation? I refuse to believe you won't die if I bury you under 1,000 talismans. He closed his eyes. Energy rose from his spiritual sea, guided into the paper between his fingers. In his mind, the blueprint of an explosion talisman unfolded, every line, every angle, every node of power. He recalled it perfectly. The pattern began to etch itself onto the page, glowing faintly as spiritual energy soaked in. A few seconds later, it was done. A complete explosion talisman. Xiang Yu opened his eyes and inspected it with quiet satisfaction. It worked, but he could feel the cost. A subtle strain tugged at his spiritual sea, the first real pressure he'd felt since it formed. Not enough to cripple him, but enough to warn him. Mass production would be a battle of endurance as much as skill. He didn't care. He grabbed another blank sheet and started again. One talisman after another, his pile of explosive gifts grew, and with each success, his confidence rose along with it. Minutes slipped by as Xiang Yu kept drawing talismans without pause. By the time he finally stopped to count, more than 20 explosive talismans lay stacked beside him. Only then did the exhaustion hit. His temples throbbed. His focus wavered. When he looked inward, his spiritual sea felt thin and dry, like a lake drained by constant use. The continuous channeling had taken more than he'd realized. He forced himself to make a few more, then set the brush down and exhaled. Rest first. As his mind loosened, he finally paid proper attention to the spring surrounding the spirit vein's core. The water shimmered faintly, wrapping the cavern in a soft glow. It looked exactly like the kind of holy spring that showed up in every cultivation story he'd ever read. Curious, he walked to the edge and triggered appraiser. Spirit spring. So he wasn't imagining it. Spirit springs, from what he remembered, were pools saturated with spiritual energy, good for recovery, cultivation, sometimes even body refinement. The only question was how to use it. Drink it? Soak in it? He decided to test first. Xiang Yu knelt, scooped a palmful of the iridescent water, and took a careful sip. Instant regret. He spat it out at once, face twisting. The taste was violently bitter, almost corrosive, and the liquid seemed to thrash in his mouth like it didn't want to be swallowed. Soaking it is, he muttered, embarrassed even though no one was watching. He stripped quickly and eased himself into the spring. The moment the water covered him, a cool, refreshing force rushed through his body. It seeped into skin, muscle, and meridians, like the spring was washing him from the inside out. Every cell tingled. He could even feel subtle changes under the surface, as if the spring carried a faint body-tempering effect along with its spiritual qi. Xiang Yu took advantage immediately. He settled into a meditative posture in the water and sank his awareness inward. While the spring replenished his qi, he focused on repairing his depleted spiritual sea. Slowly, steadily, the dry lake inside him began to refill. Time blurred. The cavern disappeared. Only the flow remained, qi circulating, breath steady, mind sinking deeper and deeper until everything felt smooth and silent. Then the system screen snapped into existence, yanking him back. His eyes opened sharply. Reset results. Body refining, 11th layer, 420/11, 000, plus 60/11, 000. Qi gathering, 3rd layer, 150/300 plus 150/300. Mind, level 4, 308/4000 plus 60/4000. Transcendent Tao Body, level 1, 25/1, 000, 000 plus 1/1, 000, 000. Enlightenment, high, 760/3000 plus 46/3000. Spirit Flame, Abyssal Void Flame, 6th grade, 5075/40, 000 plus 5/40, 000. High grade Lightning Strike and Palm, beginner, 20/100. High grade Fire Palm, minor success, 2 out of 200 plus 2/200. High grade Water, Wood Earth, Metal Palm, beginner, 60 out of 100. Cook, 4th grade, 20/600 plus 20/600. Appraiser, 9th grade, 50 out of 100 plus 50/100. Talisman Maker, 9th grade, 30 out of 100 plus 30/100. Then the bonus line appeared. Experience points doubled, and the numbers rolled forward again like a second wave. Talisman Maker, 9th grade, 30 out of 100, 9th grade, 60 out of 100. Appraiser, 9th grade, 50 out of 100, 8th grade, 0/200. Cook, 4th grade, 20/600, 4th grade, 40/600. High grade Water, Wood Earth, Metal Palm, beginner, 60 out of 100, minor success, 0 out of 200. High grade Fire Palm, minor success, 2 out of 200, minor success, 4 out of 200. High grade Lightning Strike and Palm, beginner, 20/100, beginner, 40/100. Spirit Flame, Abyssal Void Flame, 6th grade, 5075/40, 000, 6th grade, 10, 150/40, 000. Enlightenment, high, 760/3000, high, 1520 to 3000. Transcendent Tao Body, level 1, 25/1, 000, 000, level 1, 50/1, 000, 000. Mind, level 4, 308/4000, level 4, 616/4000. Qi Gathering, 3rd layer, 150/300, 4th layer, 0/400. Body Refining, 11th layer, 420/11, 000, 11th layer, 840/11, 000. Xiang Yu stared for a moment, then slowly understood what he'd just gained. The spring had helped body refining, but only a little. The real shock was Qi Gathering. His normal daily cultivation gave him decent progress, but a short soak here had practically shoved him over the line into the next layer. And unlike spirit food, nothing was wasted. With spirit food, his mediocre spiritual root could only swallow a fraction of the energy. The rest leaked away. But the spring fed qi into him through his skin and meridians, naturally, evenly, with a much higher utilization rate. Any excess didn't vanish into the air either. It stayed in the spring. Gentle, too. No violent surges, no risk of losing control. He could cultivate while doing other things, just letting the spring grind progress into him. But when he looked again, he noticed the spring's glow had dimmed. The water that once shimmered with color now looked almost ordinary. The spiritual essence had been heavily drained. Xiang Yu wasn't worried. A spring would recharge as long as the spirit vein continued producing qi. Still, it was a clue. This spirit vein wasn't some heaven-ranked monster. It was probably on the lower end. His spiritual qi hadn't fully recovered either, but the doubled mind gains finished the job, even expanding its capacity a little. As always, the system felt unfair in the best possible way. The biggest surprise was Appraiser. He'd spammed it earlier to grind experience, pushed it halfway through 9th grade, then the doubling effect kicked it straight into 8th grade. He immediately tested the upgrade. He picked up one of his explosion talismans and activated Appraiser. 9th grade talisman. Xiang Yu let out a disappointed sigh. Better than before, sure. It could identify the grade now. But it still didn't tell him the talisman type, which was the whole point of appraisal in a fight. He turned to the herbs next. 9th grade herb times 12. 8th grade herb times 5. 7th grade herb times 2. His eyebrows rose. That was far better than he expected. This hidden cave wasn't just rich, it was a treasure storehouse. Finally, he appraised the tree itself. Low-grade spirit vein. So his guess had been right. Not a top-tier vein, but still an absurd find. Even low-grade, it could nurture 7th-grade herbs. That alone was enough to make sects slaughter each other. But this wasn't the moment to harvest. Not while enemies were still combing the pavilion, hunting him. Xiang Yu looked down at the talismans he'd already made. 28. For most people, that would already be terrifying. For a core formation cultivator, even an injured one, it still wasn't enough. Not yet.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Elder May, what is the meaning of this? Elder Guo questioned, his sword pointing directly at Elder May's throat. The courtyard had descended into chaos around them, with disciples fleeing in every direction and bodies of the fallen scattered across the ground. You actually colluded with outsiders to attack your own people, Elder Huang added, her blade steady as she flanked him from the other side. Her eyes burned with fury. Martial uncle treated you so well, and this is how you repay him? Colluding. Elder May's lips curved into a smile. He threw his head back and erupted into laughter that echoed across the courtyard. The sound sent chills down the spines of the remaining disciples who watched from a distance. Elder Guo and Huang exchanged nervous glances, their grip on their weapons tightening. Why would I need to collude with them? Elder May wiped away a tear of mirth. I was never one of you to begin with. In the next heartbeat, his hands began channeling a dark, ominous energy that seemed to devour the surrounding light. Black mist swirled around his fingers, carrying the unmistakable taint of demonic cultivation. Elder Guo's eyes widened in disbelief. You were actually a demonic cultivator from the start? Elder May's smile only widened. I hadn't planned to reveal myself before getting the treasure, but who cares now? The demonic energy around his hands intensified. Treasure. Elder Huang followed his gaze toward the towering pagoda behind them. Realization dawned on her face. You're actually after the heaven-testing pagoda? Elder May scoffed, the sound dripping with disdain. What heaven-testing pagoda? That's clearly a treasure of our woming cult ancestors' making. His eyes gleamed with fanatical devotion. The demon's ceiling tower. He shook his head dismissively. Well, there's no point in educating you Orthodox sect bastards. Without warning, Elder May unleashed a vicious claw attack toward Elder Guo. Though the elder attempted to block, the demonic strike connected squarely with his chest, sending him flying backward through the air. Elder Huang seized the opportunity to attack from behind, but May sensed her approach. He caught her sword arm mid-strike, then pivoted and hurled her like a ragdoll toward the already airborne Elder Guo. Their bodies collided with a sickening thud before both crashed against the pagoda's outer wall. Junior sister, are you okay? Elder Guo asked, cradling Elder Huang in his arms amidst the dust and debris. A faint blush colored her cheeks before she quickly jumped to her feet, composing herself. Elder Guo attempted to rise but stumbled, coughing violently. A stream of blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. Elder Huang rushed to his side. Senior brother, are you okay? Did your injury relapse? Elder May approached them leisurely, his step unhurried, his laughter echoing in the courtyard. Elder Huang positioned herself protectively in front of Elder Guo, her sword raised despite her trembling hands. To think the sect genius has fallen to this state, Elder May mocked, looking down at Elder Guo with undisguised contempt. This wouldn't have happened if you had just minded your own business. What do you mean by that? Guo struggled to rise, his face pale with exertion. Elder Huang placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. Senior brother, don't force yourself. Well, I guess I can tell you now that things have come to this, Elder Mei said. Years ago, the sect master of the Azure Cloud Sword sect had 3 disciples, his biological son, and 2 adopted sons he treated as his own, Mei Ziyuan and Guoshantian. Among them, Guoshantian shone brightest, his talent unrivaled and his future limitless. He was the natural successor to become sect master when the old master passed away. But the sect genius didn't want to be sect master, Elder Mei continued, his voice bitter with old resentment. So all I had to do was get rid of the useless son, and I'd be sect master. His eyes narrowed. But you just had to interfere. If he had become sect master back then, his mission would have been completed years ago. Because of Guoshantian, his plans had been delayed for over a decade. Elder Guo rose to his feet, pushing Elder Huang away as understanding dawned on his face. Does that mean you had something to do with Master's death? Elder Mei's only response was a smug smile. Something snapped within Elder Guo. His face contorted with rage. You bastard, he roared. Suddenly, a brilliant golden aura erupted around him, pulsating with pure spiritual energy so intense that it forced Elder Huang back, despite her attempts to approach him. Senior brother, don't, she cried out, shielding her eyes from the blinding light. Elder Mei took an involuntary step backward, momentary fear flashing across his face. You actually managed to recover your strength? Then, noticing Elder Guo's strained expression, his confidence returned. No, there's no way a lower-level sect like the Azure Cloud sect could afford it. You're burning your golden core to achieve this power. If you do this, you'll never be able to advance again, even if you survive. But Elder Guo was beyond listening. The golden aura intensified until it seemed he stood within a miniature sun. When the light stabilized, he fixed Elder Mei with a gaze of pure hatred. It doesn't matter if I can't advance anymore, he declared, his voice resonating with power. I will definitely kill you today. He charged forward, his sword coated with brilliant energy as it descended upon Mei. The traitor raised a shield of demonic energy that met the blade with a sound like metal striking metal. But Elder Mei lost the contest of strength and was thrown several meters backward, his feet carving furrows in the earth. He stared at Elder Guo in shock. How could a mere burning of the golden core produce such power? Elder Mei himself had reached the early stage of the golden core realm using resources from the Wuming cult. He had calculated that with his strength and subordinates, he should have easily overwhelmed the sect. Yet here he was, being tossed around like a novice. As another blow sent him flying, his face twisted with hatred. This damn Guoshantian, always ruining his plans back then, and now again today. No, he wouldn't allow it. Elder Mei's body began emitting even more demonic power until he was completely enveloped in darkness. When Elder Guo's next punch came, he caught it midair, his palm smoking where it connected with the golden energy. It's my turn now, he spoke menacingly, demonic chi swirling around him. Xiang Yu exhaled heavily, his gaze falling upon the impressive stack of talismans he had created. Over 100 of them now rested in his hands. His spiritual chi had really improved after the system's doubling effect, allowing him to produce far more talismans than he initially thought possible. Still, it wasn't nearly as many as he had hoped for. He settled into a meditative position, focusing on recovering his depleted spiritual chi. Though he preferred to craft more talismans, time was running short. His chi sense had detected the 2 Foundation establishment cultivators drawing closer to his location. He couldn't risk them discovering the spirit vein, even if he managed to kill them afterward. What if they somehow managed to send information back and expose the existence of the spirit vein? His lips curled into a frown. He couldn't sense the core formation cultivator among them. He assumed that he might be trying to recover from the earlier attack. Still, this presented a perfect opportunity to eliminate the weaker threats first. As for the core formation cultivator, he would devise a strategy when the time came. After several minutes of focused meditation, Xiang Yu felt his spiritual energy stabilize at an acceptable level. Rising from his position, he cast one final glance at the spirit vein, noting with satisfaction that the spring was gradually regaining its multicolored hue. Xiang Yu removed the large rock blocking the cave entrance. After slipping through the opening, he meticulously replaced the stone, ensuring no casual observer would discover this hidden treasure. Outside the small cave, he gathered fallen branches and foliage, arranging them to conceal the entrance completely. Expanding his chi sense outward, he located the 2 foundation establishment cultivators. He wasn't concerned about them detecting his probing. The chi sense of a foundation establishment cultivator wasn't that strong. He had already tested this with the previous assassins. Still, he remained cautious about extending his awareness too far, wary that the core formation expert might possess methods beyond his current understanding. Moving silently through the forest, Xiang Yu approached his targets stealthily. From his elevated position in a tall tree, he finally spotted them. The 2 foundation establishment cultivators stood in a small clearing, engaged in conversation. Initially, Xiang Yu felt a flutter of concern at finding them together rather than separated. Dealing with 2 foundation establishment cultivators simultaneously wouldn't be easy. But thinking about it, maybe this wasn't so bad after all. This way, he could get rid of both at the same time. A devious plan formed in his mind, causing his lips to spread into an unsettling smile. They won't know what hit them, he thought. Without further hesitation, Xiang Yu leapt from his hiding place. The 2 foundation establishment cultivators huddled together, frustration evident in their expressions as they exchanged findings from their separate searches. I've checked the eastern sector thoroughly. Nothing, the first cultivator reported, his brow furrowed with annoyance. The second shook his head. The western quadrant is clear as well. How far could a mere mortal have gone? We've searched nearly the entire pavilion without finding a single trace. A subtle rustling of leaves interrupted their conversation. Both cultivators tensed, hands instinctively moving toward their weapons as they turned toward the sound. Their eyes widened simultaneously as they beheld an impossible sight. The very person they had spent hours hunting was standing directly before them, arms crossed casually over his chest. Xiang Yu's posture radiated an unsettling confidence that seemed entirely at odds with his supposed status as a powerless mortal. Looking for me? Xiang Yu's voice carried a hint of mockery that immediately set the cultivators on edge. The taller of the 2 recovered first, his initial surprise giving way to a predatory smile. You should have just stayed hidden, kid, he growled, taking a deliberate step forward as his companion mirrored his movement. Wait. Xiang Yu waved his hands. He then thrust his hands forward, revealing nearly 20 talismans clutched between his fingers. Don't get any closer, or I'll explode these talismans. The 2 cultivators froze momentarily, exchanging puzzled glances before they simultaneously erupted into unrestrained laughter. Their bodies shook with laughter, one cultivator actually leaning against his companion for support as tears of amusement streamed down his face. You're really funny, the shorter one wheezed, wiping tears from his eyes. Do you really think we'll fall for that trick twice? His companion snickered in agreement as they resumed their advance, completely dismissing Xiang Yu's threat. When Xiang Yu saw this reaction, he thought to himself that it was a success, but externally. His body began to visibly tremble, fear seemingly overtaking his features as he took a step back. I'm really serious this time, he stammered, his voice cracking with terror. Don't come any closer. I'll really throw them. His fingers clutched the talismans so tightly that his knuckles whitened. Their laughter intensified at this pathetic display, the taller cultivator actually doubling over with amusement. Why don't you throw it? He taunted between gasping breaths. Xiang Yu retreated another step, his shoulders hunched. I'll really do it, he insisted. The cultivators exchanged amused glances, clearly enjoying what they perceived as a mortal's futile attempt at intimidation. Tell you what, the shorter one proposed mockingly, we'll just stand here and not move. Why don't you throw them? His companion nodded, both grinning. In his mind, Xiang Yu thought coldly, since you insist, then don't blame me for being impolite. Yet his facade of terror remained perfect, his body continuing to tremble as he slowly raised his hands holding the talismans. "I'll really do it," he warned one final time, his voice wavering. The cultivators responded with renewed laughter, completely oblivious to Xiang Yu's thoughts. Xiang Yu's trembling lips curved into a subtle smile. His plan had worked perfectly. In one fluid motion, he hurled all 20 talismans directly at the two cultivators. Without waiting to witness the immediate aftermath, he instantly activated his movement technique and propelled himself away from the soon-to-be blast zone. As he moved through the forest, Xiang Yu noted that a single talisman had been enough to severely injure a core formation cultivator, though he had been caught off guard. Now he had deployed 20 simultaneously. Though some might see this as excessive for two foundation establishment cultivators, Xiang Yu believed in being thorough. What if they possessed some heavenly defensive treasure? When making his move, he always made sure it was lethal. Several meters away, he halted atop a tall tree and turned to observe his handiwork. The talismans didn't detonate in one massive explosion, but rather in a devastating chain reaction. The rapid succession of blasts reminded him oddly of popcorn popping. He extended his chi sense over the explosion site, monitoring for any sign that either cultivator might have somehow escaped the explosion. As the final explosion faded and the dust began to settle, Xiang Yu confirmed with satisfaction that both cultivators had been completely annihilated. Not even their ashes remained. He exhaled softly in relief. It seemed they didn't possess any heavenly defensive treasures after all. In the very next instant, a powerful presence materialized at the explosion site. The core formation cultivator had arrived, his body fully recovered. Even the arm that Xiang Yu had previously blown off had been completely regenerated. The cultivator's head turned, his piercing gaze locking directly onto Xiang Yu's position among the trees. Xiang Yu's eyes widened in shock as the core formation expert pinpointed his location instantly. The cultivator's methods were clearly beyond ordinary tracking techniques. Before Xiang Yu could formulate an escape plan, the expert materialized directly in front of him, moving with such blinding speed that Xiang Yu's eyes could barely follow. Instinctively, Xiang Yu began trembling, adopting his practiced facade of terror, but the core formation cultivator wasn't deceived. The man drew back his massive fist, the air itself seeming to compress around his knuckles as he prepared to strike. "Your chi sense is all over the place, yet you pretend to be immortal," the man declared, his voice filled with contempt. Xiang Yu finally realized what was happening. The cultivator had tracked him through his extended chi sense. He felt a moment of relief at his earlier decision not to blanket the entire pavilion with his chi sense. If he had really gone through with it, he would have immediately betrayed his position and potentially exposed the hidden spirit vein. With milliseconds to spare, Xiang Yu channeled everything into his movement technique, propelling himself away at maximum speed. The cultivator's fist connected with the tree where Xiang Yu had perched just moments before, obliterating it into splinters that exploded outward like wooden shrapnel. Landing several meters away, Xiang Yu observed the devastation, his lips twitching slightly. Such a huge tree had been reduced to fragments with a single punch. How was he supposed to fight against such overwhelming power? Perhaps he should have waited until he'd refined a few thousands more talismans before confronting this opponent. "Just as I thought, you're hiding your strength," the man continued, his lips curling into a predatory smile. He rose from the ground, his body floating eerily through the air as he approached. "To think that you have a scripture that can hide your strength so deeply. Hand it over, and maybe I'll leave your corpse intact." Xiang Yu stared at him with deadpan eyes. Who wants an intact corpse? Without hesitation, he whirled around and bolted, activating his movement technique once more. The core formation expert's laughter echoed through the forest as he gave chase. Despite Xiang Yu's considerable speed, the gap between them steadily closed, the difference in their cultivation realms becoming apparent with each passing second. As the cultivator's presence loomed directly behind him, Xiang Yu suddenly turned around to face his pursuer with palm extended. The abrupt reversal caught the man by surprise, causing him to momentarily decelerate. Their palms collided with tremendous force, sending Xiang Yu flying backward several meters. But in that brief moment of contact, Xiang Yu had accomplished his true objective. The cultivator's eyes widened in sudden realization as he desperately shook his arm, barely managing to shake off the talisman Xiang Yu had placed there. Despite his quick reaction, he couldn't completely escape the explosion that followed, the blast hurling him backward through the air. Rising from where he'd landed, the core formation expert assessed the situation. One moment's delay, and he would have suffered severe injuries. He'd assumed the boy had depleted his supply of talismans in the earlier explosions. After all, such items were crafted exclusively by Golden Core realm experts or above. How could a disciple from a minor sect possess so many? 20 talismans had already seemed insanely excessive, yet the boy somehow had even more. Had their intelligence been flawed? No, the man was certain they had accurately assessed every expert within the Azure Cloud Sword sect. The only explanation was that the disciple himself was the anomaly. He must have stumbled upon some ancient inheritance, which would explain his possession of such an advanced concealment scripture. Greed flickered across the cultivator's face if he could take this inheritance for himself. But the momentary distraction proved costly. When he refocused, Xiang Yu had completely vanished from sight. Although Xiang Yu had fled, the core formation cultivator tracked him effortlessly, his chi sense detecting that the young disciple hadn't traveled far. Despite Xiang Yu's ability to conceal his cultivation level, the expert possessed numerous methods of detection beyond mere cultivation sensing. After pinpointing Xiang Yu's exact location, the man charged in Xiang Yu's direction. Upon reaching an open clearing, the cultivator slowed his pace, carefully scanning the surroundings. Something about the situation made him uneasy. "Show yourself, kid," he called out, his voice carrying across the clearing. Xiang Yu emerged from behind a tree on the opposite side of the clearing. He observed the man with calculating eyes, inwardly acknowledging that the core formation cultivator's chi sense nearly matched his own. The man had detected him despite his concealed cultivation. To truly evade such perception, he would need an advanced concealment scripture capable of masking not just his cultivation, but his entire presence. Seeing as he couldn't hide anymore, Xiang Yu drew his sword with a sigh. "Not running anymore?" the man asked, advancing into the clearing unhurriedly. When Xiang Yu remained silent, a predatory grin spread across the cultivator's face. "At least you know that you can't run," he taunted, suddenly accelerating into a charge. Xiang Yu watched the approaching man, but he didn't make any moves. Any time now, he thought. The core formation expert continued his charge, closing the distance rapidly, until the world around him suddenly changed. One moment he was rushing through the open ground, the next, he found himself in the middle of a chaotic battlefield as explosions detonated in rapid succession. The first blast caught him directly, sending shockwaves through his body before he could mount a defense. As he struggled to regain his bearings, a second explosion struck, then a third. Only then did the cultivator realize the situation he was in. The entire area had been planted with talisman. The man's mind raced quickly for a solution. Instantly, he launched himself skyward, escaping the explosion radius. Observing from a safe distance, Xiang Yu clicked his tongue in disappointment. The core formation expert had escaped faster than he had anticipated. Still, he'd managed to land several significant blows. After the first direct hit, the cultivator had erected a protective barrier, reducing the impact of subsequent explosions, but the cumulative damage was undeniable. Combined with his previous injuries, the man's combat power had reduced significantly, definitely nowhere near his peak. In this weakened state, Xiang Yu thought that he might actually stand a chance. "You bastard! How dare you trick me?" the cultivator roared, his voice thundering with rage as he dove from the air towards Xiang Yu. Xiang Yu watched the core formation cultivator approach, noting how the man's speed had decreased significantly after taking multiple talisman explosions. He tightened his grip on his sword and settled into a stance, ready for the confrontation. The cultivator infused his fists with qi, causing them to glow with dark energy as he descended from above. Xiang Yu raised his sword just in time to block the attack, but despite the man's weakened state, the raw power difference was undeniable. The impact sent Xiang Yu skidding backwards several meters, his feet carving furrows through the earth. Even a weakened core formation cultivator is still formidable, Xiang Yu thought, his arms tingling from the force of the blow. When they separated, Xiang Yu decided to seize the initiative. He activated his lightning strike sword technique and launched into an offensive. Though the technique remained at the beginner stage, his perfect mastery of sword fundamentals compensated for this limitation. What he lacked in elemental damage, he made up for with flawless execution. He delivered a series of blindingly fast strikes, the lightning strike style specialized in overwhelming speed. As he backed away to assess the damage, Xiang Yu was surprised by the effectiveness of his attack. The core formation cultivator examined his hands where he'd blocked the strikes. Wisps of smoke rose from the impact points, though he showed no signs of serious injury. He lifted his gaze to Xiang Yu, his expression shifting from dismissive to serious. Xiang Yu charged again, unleashing another flurry of attacks. The cultivator blocked with his other hand, then countered with a powerful punch from his free hand. Xiang Yu quickly redirected his sword to parry the strike, though the force still pushed him back slightly. In that moment of contact, Xiang Yu made a crucial observation. The man seemed unusually cautious about his sword. Looking at his blade, understanding dawned on him. The cultivator wasn't wary of the sword itself, but of the lightning element it carried. The demonic energy the man wielded apparently had a weakness to lightning. So that's why I'm dealing more damage than expected, Xiang Yu realized. I have the elemental advantage. Still, this advantage alone wouldn't be enough to secure a victory. If anything, it was just a minor inconvenience to the core formation expert. It seemed that he still needed to use his other plan in order to win. This alternative plan also had a risk factor to it, but there was nothing he could do about it. Xiang Yu charged toward the cultivator, then abruptly changed direction. He leapt onto a nearby tree trunk, using it as a springboard to launch himself over the man's head. The cultivator raised his hands defensively, but instead of attacking, Xiang Yu simply used the man's outstretched arms as stepping stones to propel himself into the clearing. The core formation expert whirled around to find Xiang Yu waving his sword provocatively from the open space. Suspicion flickered across the cultivator's face. Could there be more talismans hidden in the ground? He wondered, eyeing Xiang Yu's confident movements. The youth continued pacing around the clearing, issuing silent challenges with each step. The man deliberated, trying to determine if this was another trap or merely a bluff. After a moment's consideration, he reached a decision. No matter, he thought to himself. I'll simply step where the boy has already walked. If explosives truly lie beneath, he wouldn't willingly step on them. The cultivator approached the clearing cautiously, testing the first step by placing his foot down and then quickly withdrawing it. When no explosion followed, he finally entered the clearing proper, but maintained his vigilance, carefully following Xiang Yu's previous path. Xiang Yu observed this with satisfaction. In truth, he had hidden all his remaining talismans throughout this area, using earth qi to conceal them. Even with the cultivator's powerful qi sense, there was no way to detect where the talismans lay. Xiang Yu alone knew their precise locations. This wasn't meant as a direct attack. His earlier attempt had already proven ineffective. After all, the man could just fly away. Instead, this was about controlling the battlefield. If the cultivator wanted to avoid triggering the hidden talismans, he would need to pay constant attention to his movements, forcing him to move more cautiously. This levels the playing field, Xiang Yu thought. The talismans were now a double-edged sword. Unlike when he had thrown them directly, these buried talismans would trigger instantly if stepped on. The resulting explosion would catch them both in its radius, leaving no time for escape. After taking several more steps without incident, the cultivator grew more confident and began advancing towards Xiang Yu. Xiang Yu backed away gradually, noting with satisfaction how the man moved more deliberately than before. Speed is a crucial factor in combat strength, Xiang Yu observed. With this limitation on his movement, The gap between our abilities narrows considerably. With this, the fight was now somewhat doable. Inside the heaven-testing pagoda, Li Yao sat in lotus posture, her expression strained as she circulated the overwhelming energy through her meridians. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead as she focused intently on refining the powerful qi that flooded her qi pathways. This spiritual energy from senior brother's food is truly remarkable, she thought, struggling to process the potent force coursing through her body. I've never encountered anything quite this concentrated before. The minutes stretched on as she carefully guided the energy through her pathways, carefully integrating it into her core. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of intense concentration, she opened her eyes and released a long, controlled breath, her shoulders relaxing as tension melted away. A sense of accomplishment washed over her as she realized the full extent of what had happened. Senior brother's spirit food alone has advanced my cultivation by 2 entire stages, from the 3rd layer of core formation all the way to the 5th layer. Are you finally done? The Empress's voice echoed in her mind. Yes, Li Yao responded aloud, flexing her fingers as she tested her restored energy. And I've completely recovered too. She clenched her fists, feeling the power surging beneath her skin as a question formed in her mind. I wonder if this strength is enough to conquer the final floor. You might not have the chance to test that out, the Empress replied. Li Yao's brow furrowed with confusion. What do you mean by that? Am I still not strong enough? With her newly enhanced cultivation at the 5th layer of core formation, she believed she could battle on equal terms with the demon she'd defeated earlier. And if she transformed into her elemental form, her fighting capacity might even reach the equivalent of a late-stage golden core cultivator. Unless the opponent on the 100th floor was at peak golden core realm, she should stand a fighting chance. The Empress's doubt made little sense to her. That's not what I meant, the Empress sighed, her mental voice conveying genuine concern. I've been sensing some commotion happening outside for a while now. The situation doesn't look good. Li Yao's heart skipped a beat. Wait, does that mean senior brother is in danger? Her voice rose with sudden panic, thoughts of the pagoda challenge instantly forgotten. Probably, the Empress confirmed. Oh no! I have to go save him. Li Yao scrambled to her feet, frantically reaching for the token hanging at her waist, the special talisman that allowed disciples to enter and exit the heaven-testing pagoda at will. She activated the token, expecting the familiar sensation of spatial transfer. But nothing happened. She tried again, channeling more qi into the token, only to be met with the same result. What's happening? Why can't I leave? Her voice trembled with rising panic as she stared at the seemingly useless token in her palm. From the shadows of the chamber, a voice suddenly spoke, breaking the silence. Little girl, don't be in such a hurry to leave. Xiang Yu observed the charging cultivator, steadying his stance as he prepared for impact. Despite the enormous power difference between them, he felt a glimmer of confidence. Within this talisman-laden battlefield, the playing field had become somewhat equalized. The core formation expert might possess overwhelming strength, but his movement was now severely restricted. The man approached with fury burning in his eyes, his fist leading the charge, yet Xiang Yu noted how the cultivator moved with heightened caution. Having fallen for Xiang Yu's tricks twice already, the man was clearly determined not to be caught off guard again. As the powerful fist closed in, Xiang Yu raised his sword to meet it, deliberately channeling lightning qi through the blade to maximize its effectiveness against the man's demonic energy. The collision sent vibrations through both combatants, forcing them to slide backward from the impact. Xiang Yu glanced appreciatively at his sword as they separated. I should thank that assassin for giving me such an excellent lightning technique, he thought. If he weren't trying to kill me, I'd definitely light some incense in his honor. From their brief exchange, Xiang Yu confirmed what he had suspected. The cultivator's strength had indeed diminished considerably. However, the man had also raised his guard completely, which meant defeating him would require significantly more effort than before. Fortunately, with battle instinct maxed to the mortal limit, detecting gaps in the man's defense wasn't particularly challenging for Xiang Yu. He charged forward with his lightning-infused sword raised high. The core formation expert glanced behind himself nervously, noticing the absence of footprints in Xiang Yu's wake. He couldn't retreat. What if there were more unseen talismans in the ground behind him? Damn it, I'll just face him head-on, the cultivator decided. Even if I'm not at full power, what could a mere disciple from a low-level sect possibly do to me? He raised his arms defensively as Xiang Yu closed the distance. The sword struck against the man's forearms, its force completely nullified by the cultivator's superior strength. But this was merely a distraction. Xiang Yu's other hand moved in a fluid motion, executing a fire palm strike directly toward the man's chest. Just this basic technique? The cultivator thought smugly, blocking the sword with just one arm while moving his free hand to counter Xiang Yu's palm with his own. When their palms collided, they initially seemed evenly matched, but in the next instant, the core formation expert's expression transformed from confidence to shock. What? He gasped, staring at the point where their hands met. His eyes widened as he realized the fire palm had suddenly changed into a lightning palm. Xiang Yu merely smiled. With his heightened battle awareness, advanced mind level, and the versatile transcendent Dao physique that allowed seamless manipulation of different energies, switching elements without any cooldown was effortless. Fooling the overconfident cultivator had been almost too easy. Though he couldn't inflict significant damage with this maneuver alone, it created the perfect opening for his true strategy. With the man's concentration momentarily disrupted, Xiang Yu twisted his hand, easily breaking free from their deadlock. As the opposing force suddenly vanished, the cultivator's weight shifted forward unexpectedly. Seizing this opportunity, Xiang Yu closed his hand firmly around the man's arm, clamping down with surprising strength to prevent the limb from being used defensively. In the same fluid motion, he maneuvered his lightning-crackling sword toward the cultivator's exposed neck, now perfectly aligned with his blade due to the man's compromised balance. The core formation expert's expression darkened as he watched the sword approach his vulnerable throat, death seemingly imminent. Then came an unexpected sound, the distinctive clank of metal striking metal. Xiang Yu's eyes widened in disbelief as he realized what had happened. The desperate cultivator had actually caught the sword with his teeth. Despite his maxed battle instinct, there were still cultivation world tactics that Xiang Yu couldn't anticipate. The man was sweating profusely, his jaw clenched around the blade as lightning energy seeped into his gums, causing them to bleed. Despite the pain, he maintained his desperate hold on the weapon. Xiang Yu recovered from his surprise almost instantly and delivered a powerful kick to the man's jaw. The force separated the cultivator from the sword, along with several bloody teeth that went flying through the air. The impact sent the core formation expert tumbling backward, but he quickly stabilized himself midair, hovering cautiously to avoid triggering any buried talismans below. His expression twisted with rage and frustration as he hovered safely above the battlefield. Fuck this, the cultivator spat, rising several meters higher above Xiang Yu. He began forming a ball of fiery energy between his palms, the radiance growing brighter and more intense until it resembled a miniature sun. He wouldn't, right? Xiang Yu's lips twitched nervously as realization dawned. He had assumed the man's arrogance and pride would prevent him from considering such a desperate tactic. But it seemed the cultivator actually intended to obliterate the entire clearing with a massive explosion. If this happened, Xiang Yu would be in grave danger. He hadn't anticipated the man would resort to such a method. Dark energy gathered and swirled around Elder Mei, intensifying with each passing moment. The sinister power expanded outward, growing larger and more concentrated until he was completely immersed in its malevolent embrace. The ominous sight caused Elder Guo to instinctively step backward, his brow furrowed as he wondered what the elder was up to. With a blood-curdling scream that echoed throughout the courtyard, Elder Mei began absorbing the dark energy directly into his body. His physical form underwent a horrific transformation as the demonic power reshaped him. His robes tore apart, unable to contain his rapidly expanding musculature, revealing a powerfully built physique rippling with strength. The years seemed to melt away from his appearance. Wrinkles vanished, his weathered skin tightened, and his elderly features reverted to those of a man in his prime. Most striking was his hair. The white strands of age darkened, and then blazed into a brilliant crimson, flowing around his head like living flames. From the center of his forehead, a horn emerged, pushing through skin and bone with a sickening crack. The protrusion was obsidian black at its base, gradually transitioning to a blood-red tip. Guashantian. The transformed elder Mei roared, his voice deeper and more resonant than before. Always interfering with my plans. His crimson eyes burned with decades of accumulated hatred. Today, let's see if you or I will die. Little girl, don't be in such a hurry to leave. A voice echoed through the chamber, prompting Li Yao to whirl around instantly. Her eyes darted to every corner, every shadow, yet she saw no one. Her hand instinctively moved to her sword hilt. So he finally decided to show himself, the Empress remarked with disdain. Show himself? Li Yao's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Did you know he was there all this time? Of course, the Empress replied, her voice dripping with pride. How could such a low-level soul escape my notice? Then why didn't you tell me? Li Yao demanded, her grip tightening on her sword. I didn't see the need to. Didn't Li Yao began, then sighed in resignation. Never mind. She paused, curiosity overtaking her momentary frustration. What do you mean by low-level soul? Is it the same as you? How could you compare me to such a person? The Empress's indignation was palpable. My soul is eternal and undying. This is just a small nascent soul. It barely passes for a soul at all. Li Yao gave up pursuing the conversation. The Empress was boasting too much. No need to be so on guard. I'm not an enemy, the voice spoke again, clearer this time, as if drawing closer though still remaining invisible. Says the person who's hiding, Li Yao retorted, her fingers still firm around her sword hilt as she continued scanning the chamber vigilantly. The voice released a weary sigh. It's not that I'm hiding. It's just that I can't come out. My name is Feng Tianqiu, the voice continued. Li Yao's eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. Wait, that's right, the voice completed her thought. I am the ancestor of the Azure Cloud Sword sect. In the grand hall of the Wuming cult, an elder approached the sect master. Sect master, do you really think that he can do it? The elder inquired, his voice tinged with a hint of doubt despite his efforts to conceal it. The sect leader merely smiled. He sat upon a throne carved from black jade, fingers drumming idly against the armrest. Of course. Although Mei Ziyuan is quite arrogant and prideful, there is no way he could fail the mission, he replied with absolute confidence. The elder clasped his hands behind his back, brow furrowed. Still, why did you have to go this roundabout way? He pressed further. With the sect master's strength, there aren't many who can match you in the eastern region. Why did you have to risk it using this method? The leader's laughter echoed throughout the hall, causing several disciples attending in the shadows to shiver involuntarily. Although it's true that I'm quite strong, I'm just a single person, he explained, leaning forward slightly. The orthodox sect masters are wary of my power, but they can't outright attack me. If I were to make a move, even against a low-level sect, it's still an orthodox sect. If those old fools decided to take this as an excuse to gang up on me. He left the sentence unfinished, but the elder nodded in understanding. Besides, the sect master continued, his voice dropping to an almost affectionate tone, I'm not risking anything. Among his generation, Mei Ziyuan is the masterpiece I created. There is no way he can lose. An evil smile spread across his face. Xiang Yu watched the growing flame attack with dread, his mind racing through possible countermeasures. Should he coat his sword with lightning and attempt to split the fireball? No, this wasn't some fantasy movie. Besides, even if he somehow managed such a feat, what if the separated halves crashed into his carefully buried talismans? The resulting chain reaction would only hasten his demise. His thoughts turned to using earth chi to burrow underground for escape. That wouldn't work either. Disturbing the ground would trigger the very talismans he'd planted, sending him to meet his ancestors even sooner. Damn it. He'd cornered himself with his own strategy. All those novels lied, he thought bitterly. Weren't villains supposed to be predictable idiots? Shouldn't this cultivator be cursing and blindly charging at him instead of employing such effective tactics? Xiang Yu exhaled slowly, recognizing he was getting too agitated. He needed to maintain his composure and find a solution. Before he could formulate a plan, he noticed something concerning. Why is it still getting bigger? He muttered, observing the expanding fireball. Wait. Realization struck him. The core formation expert had actually thrown the attack. This wasn't following the script at all. Shouldn't the man first demand he counter 3 times, then perhaps magnanimously offer to leave his corpse intact? The fireball continued growing in size as it descended toward him, the heat intensifying with each passing second. Xiang Yu wondered if this truly marked the end of his journey. Junior sister, he thought wistfully, it seems I can't marry you in this lifetime. Just as he'd resigned himself to his fate, he felt something shift inside him. Wait, that's... His expression transformed from resignation to hope. It seems luck is still on my side. Meanwhile, the core formation cultivator pushed the massive fireball towards Xiang Yu, his face deliberately devoid of emotion. Internally, he was certain this attack would annihilate the troublesome youth. He refrained from voicing any curses or premature celebrations. He didn't want to jinx his victory. He reflected on the strange progression of their encounter. Initially, he dismissed Xiang Yu as a powerless mortal, yet the young man had managed to injure him. He'd attributed this to luck, but then Xiang Yu had killed both his subordinates. Perhaps extraordinary fortune was at play? But after suffering a second and third injury at the youth's hands, coincidence seemed increasingly implausible. More unsettling was how Xiang Yu had maintained control throughout their battle despite his apparent weakness. It felt as though the young cultivator was orchestrating every exchange, making the core formation expert dance in the palm of his hand. He wouldn't be surprised if Xiang Yu was actually some ancient master using rejuvenation arts. That battle awareness was unervingly precise. Facing him evoked the same uneasiness as confronting the sect master. No, not even the sect master gave him such a seen-though feeling. He needed to end this quickly before Xiang Yu somehow reversed their positions yet again. Where's the chain reaction? The cultivator wondered. He'd expected the buried talismans to begin exploding, creating a domino effect of destruction. Could Xiang Yu have been bluffing all along? Then he noticed something peculiar. Is it just me, or is the fireball growing smaller? From his elevated position, he couldn't see beneath the massive flaming sphere, and since it was made of qi, it interfered with his qi sense. After brief deliberation, he descended from his vantage point, gliding cautiously toward the ground. His suspicions were confirmed. The flame was indeed diminishing in size. Within seconds, the entire attack had vanished completely. Xiang Yu's face split into a smug smile that made the core formation cultivator uneasy. As Xiang Yu observed the incoming fireball, resignation settling over him, he suddenly felt something stirred deep within his core. A familiar energy pulsed through his meridians, demanding his attention. Recognition dawned on his face as he identified the source, his abyssal void flame awakening in response to the threat. A smile spread across his features as he remembered Elder Huang's words about the flame. But when I tried to absorb this flame, it also tried to absorb my flames, she had said. He hadn't paid attention to this before, but now. That had been when the abyssal void flame was still in the 7th grade. Now, after his system's exponential growth, it had nearly reached the 5th grade. Looks like luck is still on my side, Xiang Yu murmured, confidence replacing his earlier despair. With this improved spirit flame, he doubted the core formation cultivator's ordinary qi-based fireball stood a chance. He could feel the abyssal void flame's hunger, its primal desire to consume other flames pulsing through their connection. As the massive fireball approached, its heat scorching the air between them, Xiang Yu raised his hand. The abyssal void flame manifested before him, hovering above his palm, an impossible darkness that absorbed all light rather than emitting it. The flame cast no shadows and reflected nothing. Its surface was a perfect void broken only by occasional white sparks flickering within its depths. To any observer, it resembled a miniature black hole. And it might as well have been as the approaching fireball began behaving strangely. The enormous sphere of destructive energy started swirling like a tornado, its trajectory bending toward the void flame as if caught in an irresistible gravitational pull. What began as a subtle distortion quickly intensified, the fireball elongating and spiraling towards Xiang Yu's palm with increasing speed. Xiang Yu felt the raw power of the incoming attack, violent, chaotic, and destructive, but the moment it made contact with his abyssal void flame, the energy settled instantly, as though tamed by a greater force. The fireball's essence poured into his spirit flame like water down a drain, feeding it, though Xiang Yu noted the contribution to his flame's growth wasn't particularly significant. The vortex accelerated, the fireball's rotation becoming a blur of motion as the last portions of the attack vanished into the abyssal void flame's endless hunger. Within seconds, the devastating attack had completely disappeared, leaving nothing between Xiang Yu and the core formation cultivator who hovered above. The man stared down at Xiang Yu, his expression transitioning from confident victory to stunned disbelief. What divine ability was that? And was that truly a spirit flame? When he focused on the dark flame hovering above Xiang Yu's palm, all color drained from his face. For just an instant, a fraction of a second so brief he nearly missed it, the abyssal void flame had looked back at him. In that moment, raw existential dread flooded through the cultivator's body. An overwhelming certainty of his own mortality gripped him, as though he'd glimpsed the ultimate end of all things within that bottomless darkness. No, the thought screamed through his mind. I need to get out of here. The mission, Elder May's orders, the sect's objectives, fuck all that. He wanted nothing to do with whatever eldritch entity this youth commanded. When Xiang Yu noticed the man's expression of absolute terror, he didn't understand the cause, but he recognized an opportunity. With the powerful cultivator momentarily distracted and hovering at low altitude, this was his chance to strike decisively before the man could ascend beyond his reach. With this thought burning in his mind, Xiang Yu activated his final trump card. The clearing held its breath, still as a painting. No insect chirped, no leaf rustled, a moment of perfect silence before chaos erupted. In the next heartbeat, the world transformed into an inferno. A massive explosion tore through the clearing, unleashing devastation comparable to a collapsed nuclear reactor. The shockwave ripped trees from their roots, hurling them through the air like matchsticks. Flames devoured everything, leaving nothing untouched as they climbed skyward in a terrible pillar of destruction. When the firestorm finally subsided, what remained was unrecognizable, a vast, smoldering crater carved deep into the earth where the clearing had once been. At its center lay the core formation expert, his body unrecognizable. Half his face had been burned beyond recognition, his left limbs entirely missing, and he was barely conscious. What happened? Where am I? The man's thoughts swam sluggishly through his pain-clouded mind. A silhouette appeared above him, blurred by his failing vision. He strained to focus, raising his remaining hand in a feeble gesture. Save, the word died on his lips as a sharp, piercing pain bloomed in his chest. His vision cleared just enough to recognize his executioner, Xiang Yu, driving a sword directly through his heart. Memory finally flooded back. Before he could escape, the hidden talismans had somehow detonated simultaneously, catching him in their combined fury. So this is death, huh? The thought drifted through his fading consciousness. His raised arm fell limply to his side as a strange, peaceful smile crossed what remained of his face. It doesn't feel all that bad. And then darkness claimed him completely. Xiang Yu collapsed beside the corpse, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He'd made an incredibly dangerous gamble, using his Earth Chi to trigger all the buried talismans simultaneously. The resulting explosion had been far more devastating than he'd anticipated. Though he'd managed to use the abyssal void flame to absorb the fire itself, he'd forgotten a crucial detail. Though the flame could absorb the fire, it didn't absorb the force of the blast. His internal organs felt like they'd been put through a meat grinder. Pain radiated through every fiber of his being, but survival instinct overrode his body's desperate pleas for rest. His eyes snapped open with sudden urgency. No, he couldn't afford to rest yet. An explosion of this magnitude would draw attention from miles around. He needed to disappear before investigators arrived at the scene. But first, a pained smile crossed his face despite his agony. I have to get my money's worth. With trembling fingers, Xiang Yu removed the spatial ring from the dead cultivator's remaining hand. At least the ring had survived the blast intact, unlike when he'd eliminated the Foundation establishment subordinates earlier, who'd been reduced to less than ash. What a waste that had been. A core formation expert's spatial ring would undoubtedly contain valuable treasures, but exploration would have to wait. Pushing through his pain, Xiang Yu sluggishly dragged himself toward the spirit spring. Upon reaching the small cave entrance, he carefully arranged the bushes to conceal the opening before slipping inside. Once through, he methodically replaced the foliage, erasing all traces of his passage. Only after repositioning the massive rock that sealed the inner chamber did he finally allow himself to relax marginally. The transcendent Dao physique truly lived up to its status. Already, he could feel his grievous internal injuries healing, not completely, but enough that his life was no longer in immediate danger. The remaining damage would heal naturally over time, but Xiang Yu couldn't afford to wait. Investigators would surely arrive soon to examine the site of the explosion. He approached the spirit spring, noting with satisfaction that it had partially replenished itself. Not fully restored to its previous glory, but sufficient for his needs. Without hesitation, he removed his tattered clothing and immersed himself in the spirit spring. As he began circulating his energy to accelerate the healing process, Xiang Yu realized that dawn had not yet broken. According to his established routine, this was still the time for mind cultivation. With that thought, he closed his eyes and plunged into the vast expanse of his spiritual sea. Li Yao's eyes narrowed with suspicion, her grip on her sword unwavering. Then why are you stopping me from leaving when the sect is under attack? Will you listen to my story first? The voice replied. Li Yao remained motionless, her defensive stance unchanged, muscles tensed and ready to react to any threat. Don't worry, your senior brother is still safe, the voice continued. The mention of Xiang Yu sent a visible jolt through Li Yao's body. Her expression hardened further, jaw clenching as she demanded, How do you know about that? It's just some divination, nothing much, the voice answered dismissively. Li Yao's eyes flicked to the side momentarily. Is what he's saying true? It is indeed divination, though I wouldn't trust it much, the Empress responded within her mind. What do you mean by that? Li Yao pressed, concern creeping into her voice. Your senior brother's destiny is quite complicated, the Empress replied with an audible sigh. What do you mean by that? Li Yao's anxiety was evident now, her previous composure cracking slightly. Don't ask. Heavenly secrets shouldn't be pried upon. Anyway, you'll figure it out eventually, the Empress answered cryptically. After a moment's pause, she added, Why don't you hear him out first? I can tell that he indeed doesn't have any bad will toward you. Upon hearing this assessment from the Empress, Li Yao allowed her shoulders to relax slightly. The grip on her sword loosened, though she remained vigilant. Come closer, the voice beckoned. In the next heartbeat, the sealed entrance to the 100th floor began to open. A wave of demonic aura immediately flooded the chamber, so intense and oppressive that Li Yao nearly buckled under its weight. Only through sheer force of will did she remain standing, her knees trembling with the effort. Cold sweat beaded on her forehead as a terrible realization dawned on her. This aura transcended any power she had ever encountered. Whatever entity resided beyond that door existed in a realm of cultivation, so far beyond her own that she couldn't even comprehend the gap between them. Was this a trap after all? The thought flashed through her mind as she struggled against the crushing pressure. Just as suddenly as it had appeared, a single sword flew out from the darkened entrance. The massive doors immediately began to close, sealing away the terrifying aura once more. As the last sliver of the opening disappeared, the oppressive force vanished completely. Li Yao collapsed to one knee, drawing in deep, desperate breaths as though she'd been underwater for too long. Her wide eyes fixed on the sword that now hovered in the air before her. Inside Li Yao's spiritual sea, a magnificent golden castle stood proudly, its towers reaching toward an endless sky. Within the central chamber, upon an ornate throne crafted from what appeared to be solidified light, sat the Empress. Her form shimmered slightly as she tapped a delicate finger against her chin, contemplation evident in her eyes. To think that I'd meet someone good at divination in this small mortal world, she mused, a smile playing across her lips. The heavenly Dao sure is full of mysteries. She stretched languidly, feeling the subtle increase in her power. Though still a mere fraction of her former glory, it was progress nonetheless. Now that I've recovered a little strength, should I also give it a shot? She wondered aloud, her voice echoing through the empty halls of her spiritual domain. Who should I try it on? Her thoughts drifted to the persistent enigma that had been nagging at her curiosity. I've always been curious about this so-called senior brother, she admitted with a mischievous smile forming on her face. Let's see what you're hiding, senior brother, she spoke cheekily, almost as though he could hear her teasing. The Empress closed her eyes, her consciousness expanding outward as she initiated the divination technique. Reality shifted around her, the golden castle dissolving into mist. In the next second, she found herself standing before an impossible staircase that spiraled upward without end, each step seemingly crafted from pure starlight. The Empress stared in bewilderment, trying to comprehend what this vision represented. Her gaze traveled upward along the infinite path, finally settling on a figure seated at the highest visible point. There, in a perfect meditative posture, sat Xiang Yu. Though he appeared somewhat older, his features more defined, his presence somehow more substantial. Before she could process this unusual sight, Xiang Yu's eyes snapped open. The Empress felt an overwhelming force wash over her, an incomprehensible power that transcended anything she had encountered in her long existence. Instantly, she found herself violently thrust back into Li Yao's spiritual sea, the golden castle materializing around her once more. She slumped against her throne, all color drained from her face, her expression frozen in absolute shock. "How is that possible?" she whispered, her voice trembling in a way it hadn't for countless millennia. "That's..." Elder Gua stared at the transformed Mei, his eyes widening in recognition. This is bloodline power, he realized. In the cultivation world, 3 main factors determined one's potential: spiritual roots, martial physiques, and bloodlines. Elder Huang possessed the Phoenix bloodline, which granted her natural affinity with fire. But Elder Mei's transformation was something far more sinister. He was becoming a demon before their very eyes. "You actually became a demon?" Elder Gua's voice carried deep disappointment. Even unorthodox cultivators in this world remained human despite their questionable methods, which was why they were merely labeled demonic cultivators. But those who crossed the forbidden threshold and transformed into demons were universally reviled. After all, demons and humans had been mortal enemies since time immemorial. "A demon? Me?" Elder Mei's lips curved into a twisted smile before he erupted in maniacal laughter. Has he finally lost it? Elder Gua thought, watching the disturbing display. Well, there's no way someone from a low-level sect like you could truly comprehend what you're witnessing, Mei sneered, his voice resonating with power. He rose into the air, looking down upon them with contempt. Watch this. His crimson eyes gleamed with malice. This is the power of the demon god. In the next instant, a small drop of blood-red energy materialized in his palm. Energy swirled around it like a miniature galaxy, condensing and intensifying until it pulsed with terrifying power. When it released, circular waves of oppressive force expanded outward, instantly silencing the chaotic courtyard. Everyone, friend and foe alike, collapsed to the ground, pinned by an invisible weight that made breathing itself a struggle. Elder Mei savored the moment, relishing the absolute control he now commanded. This is the authority of the demon god, he thought triumphantly. And to think it's so powerful after refining just a single drop of blood. His imagination raced with possibilities. What would happen with another drop? Or 10? A sinister smile spread across his face. I would be invincible. But as he basked in his apparent victory, something unusual caught his attention. Two figures had somehow managed to resist his overwhelming authority. Huang and Guo remained standing, though barely. Elder Guo's face contorted with strain, sweat pouring down his temples. The pressure bore down on him like a mountain, threatening to shatter his already damaged golden core. He could feel it cracking further, the fractures spreading at an alarming rate. Time was running out. He needed to end this battle quickly. Elder Huang fared little better. Her entire body trembled as she fought to remain upright, feeling as though her flesh might burst under the immense pressure. Only her phoenix bloodline provided modest protection, granting her just enough resistance to avoid being completely immobilized like the others. With trembling hands, she raised her sword, determined to assist her senior brother despite her condition. But before she could take a single step, Elder Mei materialized directly before her. Such speed. The thought barely had time to form in her mind. She couldn't track his movement, couldn't begin to react. Horror dawned as she watched his fist approaching her face with unstoppable momentum. All she could do was stare with wide, disbelieving eyes, her body frozen in place. Death was coming, and she couldn't even blink. Mei's face twisted with fury as he surveyed the two figures still standing. How dare they defy the authority of the demon god? His rage intensified when he looked at Elder Huang, a mere core formation cultivator, resisting his divine authority. Even worse, he detected something peculiar emanating from her that further fueled his wrath. Unforgivable, he thought, his crimson eyes narrowing. She must be eliminated immediately. In a flash, he materialized before her, his demonic fist already in motion, poised to obliterate her completely. The air itself seemed to warp around his knuckles as they accelerated toward her face. Elder Guo recognized the heightened speed of Mei's movements and rushed to intercept him, desperate to protect his junior sister. He realized that he was the only one capable of movement. Even the sect master and grand elder lay pinned to the ground by Mei's indiscriminate attack. As the strongest cultivator still standing, the responsibility to protect the sect fell on his shoulders. At least Mei's stupidity has prevented our disciples from being slaughtered outright, he thought, noting how both friend and foe alike remained immobilized. Just as Mei's fist was about to connect with Elder Huang's face, a hand materialized between them, catching the demonic blow. The impact generated such force that the dispersed air whipped Elder Huang's hair violently around her face, yet the fist went no further. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed to the ground in shock. Senior brother. Her voice trembled as she tried to regain her footing. Thanks. Elder Guo stood firmly between her and Mei, his back toward her as he maintained his grip on the demon's fist. Just stay there, he commanded without turning. In one fluid motion, he delivered a devastating counterpunch that sent Elder Mei flying several meters through the air. Don't be stubborn, he told Elder Huang before pursuing his opponent with blinding speed. He caught up to Mei mid-flight, delivering another powerful blow that sent the demon crashing toward the ground. As Mei bounced upon impact, Elder Guo was already waiting. He caught the demon's body and hurled him toward the tower with tremendous force. Mei crashed into the structure, sending debris scattering, though the ancient tower remained standing. Before Mei could fully extricate himself from the rubble, Elder Guo appeared before him. With one powerful hand, he seized Mei's head and smashed it into the courtyard, driving it deep into the earth. Without pausing, he began to run, dragging Mei's body behind him with his demonic horn plowing a furrow through the ground like a farmer's plow. Finally, Elder Guo lifted the battered demon, observing the bruised and bloodied face with cold detachment. With a casual toss, he launched Mei skyward, then pressed his palms firmly against the earth. The ground responded to his command, twisting and rising to form a sharp stone spire that impaled Mei through his back, the pointed tip emerging grotesquely from his chest. Exhaustion suddenly overwhelmed Elder Guo, forcing him to one knee as his breathing grew labored and ragged. Did you have fun beating me up? Elder Mei's voice came from behind him. Guo spun around with widened eyes, only to be met with a fist to his stomach before he could mount any defense. The impact launched him backward into the stone spire he had created, shattering its upper half and leaving him sprawled across the flattened surface. Elder Mei approached leisurely, cracking his knuckles and neck with deliberate slowness. A sadistic smile played across his demonic features as he savored his opponent's vulnerability. Out of steam already, he taunted, looming over the fallen elder. Li Yao stared at the floating sword hovering before her. "Are you the ancestor?" she asked, her head tilting slightly as she examined the blade. "No wonder it's called the Azure Cloud Sword Sect. You're definitely an Azure Cloud Sword." Her lips curved into a playful smile. "What does that even?" The voice paused, then released a weary sigh. "Never mind. I'm not a sword. I've simply bound my nascent soul to this weapon." Li Yao's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "Oh, just like the Empress's ring," she thought. "Did you really think he was a sword?" The Empress's voice echoed within Li Yao's mind, her tone filled with disbelief. "What? No. I was just making a joke to ease the tension." Li Yao defended herself aloud, causing the Empress to sigh deeply. "Ahem." Li Yao cleared her throat, straightening her posture. "Of course I know that." She brushed invisible dust from her robes, trying to reclaim some dignity. "Anyway, what do you want?" "I'm in a hurry." In the next second, the entire pagoda shuddered violently, as though gripped by a massive earthquake. The walls trembled and dust showered from the ceiling. Just as suddenly, everything stilled. The ancestor's voice carried another weary sigh before he began. "Actually, this treasure is not truly the heaven-testing pagoda." His tone grew solemn. "I had actually renamed it after taking it. The treasure's original name was the Demon Sealing Tower, and acted as a burial place for the demon god. This demon god is said to have been a cultivator from a higher realm, though how his tomb ended up in this mortal world remained a mystery. In those days, demonic sects had used the tower's resources to increase their strength at an alarming rate. When the Orthodox faction witnessed what was happening, they united against the demonic faction. Left unchecked, the demonic cultivators would have become the strongest faction within 100 years. The conflict between Orthodox and unorthodox factions raged for years, but the Orthodox faction was gradually losing ground as their enemies grew increasingly powerful. That was when Feng Tianxiu, a genius of the Orthodox faction, decided to infiltrate the demon faction to discover the source of their power. There, he witnessed the truth. The demonic faction was extracting resources from the tower and, in exchange, working to revive the demon god. Upon discovering this, he resolved to steal the tower. Yet he couldn't return it to the Orthodox faction, partly because he didn't want to endanger them with such a perilous artifact, but more importantly, because he didn't want the war to continue when the Orthodox faction was destined to lose. Instead, he announced his defection from the Orthodox faction. Word spread that their genius had been tempted by the tower's power and had run away with it. This strategy ensured that lower-ranked Orthodox faction members who knew nothing of the truth would hunt for him, while the demonic faction would cease fighting to search for their lost treasure. Just like that, peace was achieved. For Feng Tianxiu himself, he realized that although the demon god hadn't fully revived, he had regained some of his strength. Although it was just a fraction of his full power, it was still enough to cause massive destruction. He sought out a remote rural area and settled there, dedicating his existence to suppressing the demon god's awakening. Eventually, common folk noticed the immortal in their midst and begged to learn cultivation techniques from him. Thus, the Azure Cloud Sword sect was born. After many years of containing the demon god, Feng Tianxiu finally managed to reseal the entity completely. By then, however, demonic energy had corrupted his body too deeply, preventing him from cultivating further. He selected the strongest among his disciples, granting this person his Taoist name and the title of Sect Master. He renamed the tower the Heaven-Testing Pagoda, allowing disciples to test their skills and receive resources by defeating monsters formed from the miasma still leaking from the sealed demon god. Soon after, Feng Tianqiu reached his limit and passed away. A fragment of his soul survived, engraved into the sword, but over time, even this remnant was corrupted by the miasma. It eventually deteriorated into a nascent soul that now teetered on the edge of complete dissolution. As his explanation concluded, the floating sword began to tremble. A translucent figure emerged from the blade, which then fell to the floor with a resonant clang. The materialized soul took the form of an elderly man with flowing white hair and a long beard, dressed in pristine Taoist robes. He clasped his hands together respectfully. "I see that you are someone of great fortune. Even more talented than I was in my prime." The old man bowed deeply, his ethereal form shimmering. "Would you please look after the tower and ensure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands?" His eyes shone with sincerity. "You can have the Azure Cloud Sword as compensation. After years of being refined by me, although it's not yet a genuine divine weapon, it can be considered a pseudo-divine weapon." When Li Yao witnessed his bow, she rushed forward, helping him straighten. "The senior shouldn't bow," she insisted, her voice softening with respect. The man raised his eyes, hope flickering in their depths. "Does that mean?" Li Yao nodded with a warm smile, causing even the Empress watching within her consciousness to smile approvingly. As expected of the person she had chosen, such a righteous heart, even if she could be a little stupid at times. To think that the little sect I formed back then could raise such a genius and righteous child," the man spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "The human race still has some hope." Li Yao stretched out her hand expectantly. The man quickly retrieved the sword from the ground and placed it in her palm. "Once I'm gone, you'll be able to refine the sword and use it," he explained. Li Yao kept her hand outstretched, not withdrawing it. "What do you mean?" the man asked, confusion crossing his transparent features. "Pay up," Li Yao said bluntly. "Where is the reward for clearing the 99 floors?" she demanded, her earlier righteousness evaporating like morning dew. The Empress, watching from within Li Yao's spiritual sea, could only face palm. This girl really was seeking benefits after all. The ancestor smiled warmly. Of course," he said with a nod. "Since you cleared the 99 floors, you are entitled to the rewards." His transparent form shimmered slightly as he continued. "The tower decides your reward when you exit, so you don't have to worry about that." Li Yao nodded with understanding. She had been wondering why she hadn't received anything after completing each floor. It made perfect sense now. Rather than receiving low-level rewards for each individual floor, the system calculated everything at the end, providing a fitting cumulative reward upon exit. Much more efficient. "Did you really agree just because of the benefits?" the Empress asked suspiciously, her voice echoing in Li Yao's mind. "Of course not," Li Yao replied with conviction. "If the demon escaped, it would be a danger to my senior brother, so there's no way I could let that happen." She paused briefly before adding, "I just asked about the benefits for my senior brother's sake." The Empress seemed to accept this explanation, though something still felt off, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. These two kids. Without warning, the Empress's soul manifested beside Li Yao, her form glowing with a soft golden light. Li Yao gasped, turning to face her. "You can manifest?" she asked, unable to hide her shock. "Yes, I've recovered some energy," the Empress replied, her form becoming more defined as she spoke. The ancestor noticed the Empress's manifestation and visibly recoiled, his eyes widening in recognition. He immediately bowed deeply, his aged form bending with surprising grace. "I greet the immortal," he said with profound respect. "How did you know I was an immortal?" the Empress questioned, genuine curiosity in her voice. "You have the same oppressive aura as the demon god, though yours isn't demonic," he explained, maintaining his respectful posture. The Empress acknowledged this with a subtle nod. She then raised her slender hand toward the ancestor, causing streams of golden energy to flow from her fingertips into his spectral form. The light bathed him completely, purifying his essence. The ancestor immediately understood what was happening. He dropped to his knees, his head bowed low. "I thank the immortal," he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "No need," the Empress replied, her tone unusually gentle. "You did a good job resealing the demon god. With this, your soul is now free of corruption. Unfortunately, it has already deteriorated too much to recover fully, but now that it's free of corruption, you should be able to enter the river of reincarnation." Her expression softened further. "I hope you become such a hero in your next life as well." "Thank you," Feng Tianqi whispered, gratitude radiating from his being as his form began to dissolve into motes of light. Gradually, his spectral presence faded completely, leaving only empty air where he had stood. The Empress released a wistful sigh as the last of his essence disappeared. "I didn't think you had this side to you," Li Yao remarked with a mischievous smile playing across her lips. The Empress merely scoffed. What do you know?" she retorted before vanishing back into Li Yao's consciousness. Within the vast expanse of her spiritual sea, the Empress contemplated in solitude. As the Empress, she could also be considered the ancestor one of all humans. Seeing such a righteous human made her genuinely proud. Her gaze drifted upward to the countless stars that illuminated her spiritual domain. "Senior sister, how are you doing right now?" "Did you also reincarnate?" she whispered, her voice uncharacteristically soft and vulnerable. "It seems that you were right after all." A pause. "But you're not here to rub it in my face." Tears formed in her eyes, glimmering briefly before dissolving into the ether. "It's strange, I always hated when you did that," she continued, her voice catching slightly. "But I hate it even more when you don't." A forced smile crossed her lips. "Strange, right?" Elder Guo lay motionless on the earthen structure he had created, blood seeping from his eyes, nose, and mouth in thin rivulets. He had pushed himself beyond his limits, exhausting every last drop of energy for that final burst of strength. Within his spiritual C1, he felt his golden core flicker weakly, blinking a few more times before fading to darkness completely. His cultivation journey was over. After decades of dedication and struggle, he had become a mere mortal once again. The only regret that weighed upon his fading consciousness was his failure. He couldn't protect the master's son or the sect that had been entrusted to him. He had let his master down. If they met in the underworld, he hoped the master wouldn't scold him too harshly for his failure. With that thought, his eyelids grew heavy. As consciousness began to slip away, the world around him dimming at the edges, a desperate cry pierced through the encroaching darkness. "No, I won't let you kill senior brother." The voice sounded familiar, though his mind was too clouded to place it immediately. "Whose voice is that? I think I've heard it before," he thought hazily. "Senior brother, no." The anguished scream finally penetrated the fog in his mind. That's right, it was his junior sister's voice. How could he have forgotten? With tremendous effort, his eyelids fluttered open, allowing him to witness the scene unfolding before him. Mei was stalking toward him with predatory intent, each step radiating malicious purpose. Behind him, Elder Huang clung desperately to his waist, her feet dragging furrows in the earth as she fought with every ounce of her strength to hold him back. Despite her valiant effort, she couldn't slow his advance. "Damn woman," Elder Mei snarled, his transformed face contorting with rage. "If you want to join him so badly, I'll help you." With a casual backhand, he struck Elder Huang with such force that she was sent flying several meters, her body tumbling across the courtyard like a discarded doll. "No, junior sister." Elder Guo's thoughts formed the words, but his voice failed him. He raised his hand tremulously, fingers outstretched toward her fallen form. "Still resisting?" Elder Mei sneered as he closed the distance between them, demonic energy swirling around his clenched fists. Before he could reach Elder Guo, a tremendous explosion shook the entire sect grounds, the distant concussion powerful enough to create tremors beneath them. The sudden disturbance caused Elder Mei to pause, his head turning toward the source of the disturbance. In that brief moment of distraction, a figure leapt through the air and crashed into him, wrapping arms tightly around his waist. The explosion had momentarily broken his concentration, causing his demonic authority to falter just long enough for someone to act. "Sect Master, are you going to hug me to death?" Elder Mei mocked, recognizing his assailant. "Father always treated the three of us equally," Wei Tianxiu said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought that you would do this to us." Elder Mei cleaned his ear with his finger in a show of contempt. "So what? I'm nothing like y'all," he spat. Wei Tianxiu maintained his iron grip, turning to look at Elder Guo across the courtyard. "Senior brother, it seems that you'll lose 2 brothers today," he said, a sad smile crossing his face. Elder Guo's eyes widened in horrified realization, his breath suddenly coming in rapid, shallow gasps. "Wait. No. Stop," he tried to shout, but only a hoarse whisper escaped his lips. Wei Tianxiu paid no heed to the plea. His body began to glow with an intense golden light that grew brighter with each heartbeat. Elder Mei's expression shifted from contempt to alarm as he finally understood what was happening, but his realization came too late. The sect master used the last of his strength to lift both of them high into the air. For one suspended moment, they hung against the backdrop of the azure sky, a silhouette of golden radiance. In the next instant, they both exploded in a blinding flash that turned night into day. The shockwave rippled across the courtyard, flattening everything in its path. The sect master had self-destructed, taking Elder Mei with him into oblivion. Elder Guo stared at the explosion scene in shock, his face ashen as the reality of what had just happened settled in his mind. With trembling arms, he tried to push himself up from his position. "Junior brother," he whispered. "Stop moving, you're still hurt," Elder Huang spoke gently, her hands steadying him as she helped him sit back down. Though she bore injuries herself, her focus remained entirely on caring for her senior brother in this devastating moment. She studied his face, noting the hollow look in his eyes. This had to be the worst day of his life. Even when his golden core was injured years ago, he hadn't worn such an expression of utter devastation. But how could he not? Guo Shantian, Mei Ziyuan, and Wei Tianxiu had all trained together under the former sect master. They weren't just fellow disciples, they were best friends who had sworn brotherhood to each other. Now, one sworn brother had betrayed him, and the other had sacrificed himself in a desperate attempt to save what remained of their sect. And as if that weren't enough, Elder Guo had lost all his cultivation, reduced to a mere mortal while the sect still faced imminent danger. Elder Guo leaned against her shoulder as she gently ran her fingers through his hair. "Sect Master, He began, his words disjointed. He didn't seem to be in the right state of mind. "It's okay," she soothed. "I can't protect the sect anymore." Elder Huang surveyed their surroundings with dread. The demon authority that had pinned everyone to the ground had lifted following the explosion, and the demonic cultivators were rising to their feet. Even with their leader apparently eliminated, the enemy forces still outnumbered and outmatched the remaining sect disciples. They had really lost this battle. Just as this realization settled in her mind, a bright red light suddenly appeared in the sky, drawing everyone's attention upward. "There is no way," she thought, her breath catching in her throat as she stared at the impossible sight above them. Suspended in the air was a small drop of blood that shone with a bright crimson glow. The fighting below ceased as everyone, friend and foe alike, watched in horror. In the next second, the droplet contorted, twisting unnaturally before expanding outward in all directions. From this single drop of blood, Elder Mei's form materialized completely, fully restored as though the self-destruct explosion had never happened. Elder Huang's eyes widened in shock, her mind refusing to accept what she was witnessing. How was this possible? Even if Mei was a peak golden core cultivator, there was no way he could have survived the point-blank detonation of the sect leader's self-destruction. "Ha ha!" Elder Mei's triumphant laughter echoed across the courtyard. "Did you really think you could take me out that easily? With the power of the demon god, even if just a drop of blood remains, I can still regenerate." Around them, the remaining sect disciples dropped their weapons, shoulders slumping in defeat. The sect was truly doomed. How could they possibly defeat an enemy who could regenerate from a single drop of blood? Elder Guo stared up at the recovered Elder Mei, rage burning in his eyes despite his powerless state. Elder Huang maintained her grip on him, preventing him from moving, not that he could do anything in his current condition. As his gaze locked onto Elder Mei hovering above the courtyard, Elder Guo's eyes suddenly widened in disbelief. "Am I seeing things?" he wondered, blinking rapidly to clear his vision. "Why do I see that disciple of mine floating behind Elder Mei?" Li Yao clutched the token tightly as the familiar sensation of spatial transfer enveloped her. In an instant, she found herself suspended high above the azure cloud sect. What greeted her eyes resembled scenes from an apocalypse. The once pristine courtyard lay in ruins, bodies scattered across the broken stone like discarded dolls. Blood painted dark patterns across the ground, and the elegant sect buildings now stood partially collapsed, smoke rising from several structures. She then spotted her master and martial aunt huddled together amidst the destruction. Even from this height, Li Yao could see the numerous injuries they had sustained. Most alarming of all, she couldn't sense any cultivation from her master. Following their upward gaze, Li Yao's attention was drawn to a figure hovering next to her. "Did you really think you could take me out that easily?" The figure's voice boomed across the devastated landscape. "With the power of the demon god, even if it's just a drop of blood left, I can still regenerate." Li Yao's eyes narrowed as recognition dawned. This creature emanated the same dark energy as the monster she had faced on the 99th floor of the heaven-testing pagoda, though the aura surrounding this being was far more intense. Despite the overwhelming aura, Li Yao felt strangely calm. She had improved significantly since her battle in the pagoda. After advancing 2 stages in the core formation realm, she could more easily handle her elemental form, and her affinity with lightning had increased even more. Her fingers tightened around the hilt of the azure cloud sword. It was time to test this so-called pseudo-divine weapon. The motion drew Mei's attention, his eyes locking onto her. "And who are you?" he demanded before recognition flashed across his features. "Oh, so it's the so-called sect genius," he mocked, lips curling into a disdainful sneer. "If you had run away, you could have survived," he continued, "but now that you've shown yourself, you'll have to die here today." Li Yao met his gaze unflinchingly, her voice steady as she replied, "We'll see who dies first." Her body erupted with energy as she activated her elemental form. Blue-silver electricity crackled across her skin, her hair lifting to float around her head like a halo. The transformation felt more natural now, though she still felt a little strained. In this state, her combat power was equivalent to a late-stage golden core cultivator. Combined with the pseudo-divine weapon in her hands, she might even reach peak stage. Be careful when using the weapon. You still haven't refined it yet, the Empress's voice cautioned within her mind. Li Yao acknowledged the warning silently. Without complete refinement, she couldn't access the sword's full potential, but she didn't need it to deal with this enemy. Without further hesitation, she vanished from her position, her elemental form increasing her speed even more. She materialized directly behind Elder Mei, who spun around with impressive reflexes, but not quite fast enough. The azure cloud sword, covered in crackling lightning, sliced through the air with unstoppable momentum. The blade encountered Elder Mei's arm and passed through with virtually no resistance, severing the limb cleanly from his body. Li Yao examined the sword with appreciation. The sword was impossibly sharp, cutting through the dark element-enhanced flesh easily. From below, Elder Huang watched the exchange with wide-eyed astonishment. "Was your disciple always this strong?" she asked, turning to Elder Guo beside her. "It's my first time seeing this as well," Elder Guo admitted, his face momentarily brightening with a flicker of hope as he observed the battle unfolding above them. Li Yao's display of power exceeded anything he had witnessed from her before. Her strength seemed to surpass even the transformed Elder Mei's, suggesting she might be capable of turning the tide of this seemingly hopeless battle. Had she received some divine inheritance within the pagoda? Or had she always been this strong? Elder Mei's agonized scream tore through the air as he clutched where his arm had been. Blood flowed freely from the wound, but unlike before, the severed limb showed no signs of regenerating. Panic flashed across his features as he realized something was terribly wrong. Was it the lightning element interfering with his regeneration? No, that couldn't be it. With the blood of the demon god flowing through his veins, not even lightning should be able to prevent his recovery. Only the light element might possess such properties, and this girl clearly wielded lightning. His frantic gaze landed on the sword in Li Yao's hand, understanding dawning. It's that sword, he realized. Li Yao followed his gaze to the weapon she wielded, a slow smile spreading across her face as comprehension dawned. Does it prevent regeneration? She wondered aloud. No wonder the ancestor could use it to deal with the demon god. The smile transformed into a grin as she raised the sword once more. "Well, this makes things a lot easier," she declared, her form blurring once again as she charged toward her opponent. Daily, 1/2. Elder Mei watched the approaching sword with widening eyes, his body twisting desperately as he barely managed to dodge the attack. How could this have happened? He had thought Li Yao was strong, but never imagined she was this powerful. And where did she get that strange sword from? His mind raced with panicked thoughts as he found himself continuously pushed back, unable to land a single hit while defending against her relentless assault. If this continued, He might actually die here. Wait. Wait. You can't kill me, he shouted, voice cracking with desperation. My men have your senior brother. If I die, he will too. The words caused Li Yao to pause mid-strike. Elder Mei struggled to maintain his composure, internally relieved his bluff had worked. In truth, he had no idea what had happened to his men. Somehow they had been eliminated. Perhaps there was more to Xiang Yu than met the eye. But Li Yao didn't know that the men had already perished. According to his intelligence, the sect genius was hopelessly in love with her senior brother. Now then, what are you going to do? He thought, a smug smile spreading across his face. Then his expression froze as his smile literally split in two. Huh? He suddenly realized what had happened. Li Yao had swung her sword regardless, cleaving him cleanly in half. As his consciousness faded, final thoughts flickered through his mind. How was this possible? Wasn't she supposed to be in love with her senior brother? Why didn't she care about him? Was the information wrong? After killing Elder Mei, Li Yao floated high into the sky. She raised her hand toward the heavens, and in the next moment, lightning began to gather in her palm. The energy accumulated until it formed a massive sphere of crackling electricity. The ball of lightning then began to move, raining down countless bolts onto the battlefield below. Many scattered in terror, diving for cover, only to realize that the lightning selectively targeted only the demonic cultivators. The surviving sect members watched in awe as their enemies were struck down one by one. Hope blossomed across their faces. They were going to survive after all. Li Yao observed her handiwork with satisfaction. In her elemental form, her lightning affinity was dramatically enhanced, allowing her to eliminate all enemies with this single devastating attack. Though she had to admit, the technique was incredibly draining. She turned her attention inward, addressing the Empress. Are you sure about what you said earlier? She asked. Don't worry, with my recovered soul strength, I can easily spread my divine sense throughout the Azure Cloud Sword sect, the Empress replied confidently. Your senior brother is okay. He is the only person in the pavilion. After just a few minutes, all the remaining demonic cultivators were eliminated. Li Yao descended toward her master and martial aunt. Master, she approached tentatively, concern etched across her features. I'm okay, just a scratch, Elder Guo insisted as he attempted to move from Elder Huang's supporting grasp, only to stumble backward into her arms. I told you to stop moving, Elder Huang scolded, tightening her hold on him. Master, your cultivation. Li Yao began, but Elder Guo raised his hand to stop her. It's okay. It was bound to happen at some point, he said with resignation in his voice. Elder Huang glanced at Li Yao's worried expression. I see that you're concerned, she said softly. Why don't you go check on your senior brother? I'll look after the old man. She offered a reassuring smile, and Li Yao nodded gratefully before flying away. Who are you calling old man? Elder Guo protested weakly. Elder Huang just laughed. Now that you've lost your cultivation, you'll grow old faster. Her voice suddenly trailed off, tears welling up and streaming down her cheeks. Without his cultivation, he would age like an ordinary mortal. He had already lived far beyond a normal human lifespan. Did this mean he was going to die soon? Seeing her distress, Elder Guo averted his gaze toward the celestial summit peak, the sect master's peak. There is nothing we can do about it, he said quietly. His eyes moved to the sect members struggling to recover from the battle. At least the sect survived, he added softly, before finishing with, for now. Suddenly, Elder Huang's eyes brightened with realization. Wait, there is something we can do about it. Without warning, she pushed him to the ground and ripped open his already tattered shirt. Hey, what are you doing? Elder Guo asked in alarm. Had this woman decided to sleep with him and bear his children now that he was facing mortality? Not that he minded, but... His eyes darted to the side, noticing the large crowd of onlookers witnessing this scene. Not in front of everyone, he protested, cheeks burning with embarrassment. What are you talking about? Elder Huang looked genuinely confused by his reaction. Anyway, let me test your spiritual root. She placed her palm against his exposed abdomen and injected a stream of qi, carefully sensing what lay within. It's just as I thought, it's still there, she exclaimed triumphantly. Elder Guo, thoroughly embarrassed now, pushed her off him. So what if it's there? The golden core has already exploded, and the chi pathways are destroyed. He hurriedly donned a new shirt that had been offered to him. Then understanding dawned on him. Xiang Yu, he whispered. That's right. Just like before, he can help you recover the broken chi pathways, she confirmed excitedly. But since the core is broken, you'll have to form a new one. Basically, you'll have to start from scratch. Quick, let's go talk to him. She jumped to her feet and, before he could protest, scooped Elder Gua up in a princess carry. Wait, he objected frantically, but she ignored his complaints and flew off with him held in this embarrassing position. I should have just died, Elder Gua thought miserably, hiding his face behind his hands. How can I have any dignity left after this? Xiang Yu sat immersed in the spirit spring, his body perfectly still in deep meditation. The multicolored waters swirled gently around him, continuing to heal his remaining injuries and replenish his depleted energy. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open, alert and focused. Dawn was approaching, just a few minutes away according to his internal clock. He had stopped cultivating because of a growing uneasiness that he couldn't shake. The silence outside was unnatural and concerning. He couldn't hear the commotion happening below the peak anymore. The complete absence of noise felt more ominous than any battlefield clamor. Should he go down to check the situation? The question lingered in his mind as he weighed his options carefully. But what if enemies still lurked outside? He had already exhausted most of his resources in the earlier battle. He didn't have any more talismans. It wasn't that he didn't care. Despite having transmigrated into this body, he possessed all the memories and emotions of his predecessor. Genuine concern for his junior sister, his master, and his martial aunt nagged at him persistently. Their faces flashed through his mind, heightening his anxiety. Yet he also recognized the harsh reality of his situation. Even if he went down there now, what difference could he make? He was still too weak to face core formation cultivators directly, especially if they came in numbers. Just as these troubled thoughts circled through his mind, a familiar voice called out, piercing the silence. Senior brother, where are you? Li Yao's voice echoed through the pavilion. Relief washed over him immediately. She was alive and apparently well enough to search for him. If she was freely moving about, the immediate danger must have passed. He quickly climbed out of the spirit spring, retrieved fresh clothes from his spatial ring and dressed swiftly. After ensuring the spirit vein remained hidden, he emerged from the concealed cave entrance. Xiang Yu approached the ruins of his newly built house, where Li Yao stood examining the debris. Her eyes widened with surprise as she noticed him. Senior brother, you built a new house? She asked, gesturing toward the scattered remnants. Yeah, but it was destroyed, Xiang Yu replied, surveying the damage caused by the talisman explosion. He made a mental note to repair it when he had the chance. Concern flashed across Li Yao's face. Were you hurt? Is everything okay? In an instant, she materialized directly in front of him, crossing the distance so swiftly that he hadn't even registered her movement. Xiang Yu blinked in astonishment. Her speed surpassed even the core formation cultivator he had faced, and not by a small margin. Despite his recent breakthrough in cultivation, the gap between them remained vast. He had believed he might catch up to her now that he could cultivate properly, but he couldn't even track her movements with his eyes. Was this truly the level of a cultivation genius? He released a soft sigh. No, I'm all right. Li Yao opened her mouth to press for details, but their conversation was interrupted as Elder Gua and Elder Huang descended from the sky, landing beside them. To Xiang Yu's bewilderment, Elder Huang was carrying Elder Gua in her arms like a princess. Martial nephew, you have to help senior brother. Elder Huang exclaimed, her voice urgent and breathless. Elder Gua, thoroughly mortified by his position, buried his face in his hands, unwilling to make eye contact with his disciples. Elder Huang attempted to bow to Xiang Yu, but he quickly stopped her. Calm down, he said gently. Just explain what's going on. That's right, she nodded, catching her breath. Your master overexerted his golden core. It was already injured before, but now it's burst completely, and he's lost all his cultivation. Her voice trembled as she continued, Now that he's lost all his cultivation, he'll start aging again. Since he's exhausted all his mortal lifespan. She hesitated, her voice breaking slightly. He won't live for long. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she spoke. Senior brother said before that his chi pathways had healed when he ate your food. Since his spiritual root is still there, if his chi pathways are repaired, he should be able to cultivate once again. She tugged desperately at Xiang Yu's clothing, her eyes glistening with tears. Please help me. Xiang Yu gently detached her fingers from his clothes, taking her hands in his with a reassuring smile. Martial Ant doesn't need to be so polite, he said warmly. He's my master. Of course I'll help him. Her face crumpled at his words, and she began sobbing openly. Senior brother really took in nice disciples, she thought to herself. One was a genius who had saved the sect, and the other was also a genius who would now save him. This was how it should be. Someone as kind as her senior brother would never be abandoned by the heavens. Can you let me down now? Elder Gua asked, still cradled in Elder Huang's arms. No. You're immortal now, Elder Huang protested. What if you trip and fall to your death? Elder Gua nearly coughed blood at this ridiculous suggestion. How is that even possible? If that were true, wouldn't all mortals have died long ago? Master, you should listen to Martial Ant, Xiang Yu advised with a barely concealed smile. Li Yao approached their master, patting his head affectionately. Master, it's okay. We won't make fun of you, she said, her tone playful. Elder Gua stretched out his hand toward her. You brat, do you think I can't punish you? But Li Yao instantly vanished, reappearing safely behind Xiang Yu. With a defeated sigh, Elder Gua closed his eyes. I'll let it go for now. I'm not that petty to argue with you kids. Privately, though, he vowed to discipline his unruly disciples once he recovered. How dare they make fun of their weakened master? Junior sister, go and catch some meat. I'll prepare the herbs, Xiang Yu instructed, already mentally planning the meal he would create. Li Yao pointed toward a distant section of the partially destroyed house. Senior brother, I saw some meat over there. Shouldn't we cook that? Xiang Yu followed her gesture and instantly panicked, his eyes widening in alarm. Wait, you didn't kill them, did you? The thought of his carefully maintained livestock being slaughtered made his heart skip a beat. No, I just sensed them with my chi sense, she replied casually. Relief washed over Xiang Yu's face as he exhaled slowly. Li Yao tilted her head, curiosity evident in her expression. Is something wrong with them? Well, no, he admitted, composing himself. But those are not for eating. They're for domestication. He spoke the last word with particular emphasis, hoping she would understand the distinction. What's the difference? Li Yao asked, genuinely perplexed. In her mind, meat was meat, regardless of its source. Xiang Yu carefully explained, these are for emergencies, so we'll have something to eat if the mountain ever runs out of food. Li Yao's confusion only deepened, her brows furrowing slightly. If the mountain ever ran out of food, I would just go look for it on another mountain, she declared proudly, crossing her arms with a self-satisfied expression. Senior brother need not concern himself with such a thing. Xiang Yu could only face bomb. How could someone so extraordinarily talented in cultivation be so utterly clueless about basic survival principles? With a patient smile, he reached out and gently patted her head, his fingers lightly tousling her silky hair. Junior sister is really reliable, he acknowledged. But you won't always be here. Do you want your senior brother to starve to death when you aren't around to catch food? She fell silent, her expression growing serious as she contemplated this scenario. After a moment of deep thought, she nodded slowly. Xiang Yu felt a small sense of accomplishment, believing his explanation had finally penetrated her understanding. Then go and catch meat, he directed, making a shooing motion with his hands. Bring as much as you can. We're having a feast as promised. Li Yao's eyes lit up with excitement. Senior brother, does that mean? She began eagerly. Before she could finish, Xiang Yu pressed a finger gently against her lips. Shoo, he whispered, leaning closer. It's a surprise for Master and Martial Ant, so don't say anything. Her eyes brightened even more, sparkling with childlike delight. Without another word, she took to the air, her form blurring as she flew away with extraordinary speed. Xiang Yu watched her disappear into the distance, a contemplative expression settling on his face. He reflected on his tendency towards secrecy, a survival strategy that had served him well thus far. But perhaps it had its limitations. He couldn't hide everything forever, especially from those closest to him. If he had revealed some of his capabilities earlier, he might have alerted the sect to Elder Mei's treacherous plans. This time, his master had survived the ordeal, but what about next time? He didn't need to reveal everything, just enough to establish some credibility among his inner circle. And he knew exactly where to start. Xiang Yu walked toward the kitchen, not the one in his destroyed house, but the common kitchen of the pavilion. As he stepped inside, he realized it had been quite some time since he'd last used this space. A small smile played across his lips. Today, he would reveal one secret he had carefully hidden until now, his 4th-grade cooking skill. Since he had resolved to start revealing some of his abilities, Xiang Yu decided to begin with his cooking skills. Rather than experimenting to determine what level of cooking could fully restore his master's chi pathways, he would simply prepare the best meal possible. He couldn't continue hiding his abilities when his master's life was in danger, and he already had a plausible explanation prepared for how he had achieved such mastery. His junior sister didn't disappoint, returning with 10 wild boars. Xiang Yu chose to domesticate 5 of them for future needs, keeping his emergency food supply intact, and prepared the others for the feast. With his 4th-grade cooking skills, the preparation seemed effortless. Even his junior sister, who had come to assist, found herself standing idle as she watched him work with fluid precision. "Senior brother, you've improved even more since the last time," she remarked, observing his practiced movements. Xiang Yu continued stirring the fragrant herbs as he replied, "Of course, I've been practicing." After a momentary pause, he asked, "Did you use what I gave you?" Li Yao nodded enthusiastically. "That's right, thanks a lot. I really thought I was going to die back then." Xiang Yu smiled to himself, thinking she was probably exaggerating. How could a main character like her truly face death? She likely meant she was about to starve and had used his food as a mere snack. As they chatted, Xiang Yu continued his preparations. In just an hour, he had completed an array of dishes that would have taken ordinary chefs an entire day. "Go tell Martial Ant that it's ready," he instructed, and Li Yao departed eagerly. Xiang Yu carefully arranged the dishes in the dining area, carrying platters loaded with spirit-infused delicacies. As he worked, he reflected on how different this felt from cooking for himself. When preparing meals in his personal kitchen, he cooked mechanically, focused solely on cultivation benefits. But when creating dishes for his junior sister, master, and martial aunt, he found himself investing genuine care into each preparation. This feeling was strange, but he didn't dislike it. After placing the final dish on the table, he stepped back to admire his work. The arrangement was perfect, each dish positioned to complement the others, steam rising in delicate wisps that carried enticing aromas throughout the pavilion. Li Yao soon returned with Elder Gua and Elder Huang. Xiang Yu noticed immediately that his master was walking independently, having refused to be carried again. Despite this show of dignity, the signs of accelerated aging were already becoming visible on his features. The skin around his eyes had developed fine lines that hadn't been there before, and his posture seemed slightly more stooped. Without his cultivation to sustain him, time was clearly exacting its toll. Xiang Yu silently hoped that this meal would help restore his chi pathways. "Martial nephew, your skills have truly improved," Elder Huang marveled, inhaling deeply. "I can feel my cultivation strengthening just from the aroma alone." "Martial Ant is right," Li Yao added excitedly. "Senior brother has really improved." I was amazed watching him work. Xiang Yu smiled at their praise before turning his attention to Elder Gua. Everyone followed his gaze, staring expectantly at the master. "What?" Elder Gua retorted defensively, shifting uncomfortably under their scrutiny. When they continued looking at him without speaking, he finally relented with a dismissive shrug. "Well, I guess it's all right," he conceded grudgingly. Everyone burst into laughter at his response. This elder was truly a tsundere through and through. Even facing mortality couldn't change his stubborn personality. Everyone settled around the table, but they didn't begin eating immediately. All eyes remained fixed on Elder Gua. Since the feast had been prepared primarily for him, they wanted him to take the first bite. More importantly, they anxiously awaited evidence that the food might restore his damaged qi pathways. Feeling their expectant gazes, Elder Gua finally relented. He lifted his spoon, hesitating for just a moment before taking a bite of the spirit-infused dish. The effect was instantaneous. The moment the food touched his tongue, it exploded into pure spiritual energy. Qi surged wildly through his body, flowing like a raging river seeking its natural course. He felt the energy rush into his damaged qi pathways, the sensation both foreign and achingly familiar. Where there had been emptiness, energy now flowed. Where pathways had been shattered, new channels formed. The process was exponentially faster than his previous experience with Xiang Yu's cooking. Within seconds, his entire network of qi pathways had been restored. Unable to contain himself, Elder Gua began taking larger bites, shoveling the food into his mouth with uncharacteristic abandon. The sensation of qi flowing through his body again after experiencing its absence was like a man dying of thirst finally reaching an oasis. Did it work? Elder Huang asked eagerly, though she didn't wait for a verbal response. Her hands were already moving across his body as she injected a thin stream of qi to test his meridians. Her expression transformed into a radiant smile, not her usual playful smirk, but genuine, unrestrained joy. It worked. It really worked, she exclaimed, voice trembling slightly with emotion. Senior brother can cultivate again. Elder Gua swallowed his mouthful before tempering their excitement. Don't be happy too soon, he cautioned. Even if I can cultivate, the qi gathering stage only provides a lifespan of 200 years. I'm nearly 300 years old, so I've already exhausted my natural allotment. His words cast a somber pall over the table, the earlier elation evaporating into silence. Way to kill the mood, old man, Elder Huang clicked her tongue disapprovingly. Her momentary vulnerability vanished, replaced by her usual sharp-tongued manner. Just eat the food. With this much spiritual energy, if you can't form a foundation, you might as well die. Now that her senior brother showed signs of recovery, Elder Huang's typical demeanor had fully returned. Privately, she calculated his chances, absorbing qi, even from spiritual food, ultimately depended on talent. Her senior brother had been the most gifted cultivator of their generation, possessing a superior-grade spiritual root. He was what cultivators called a 50,000-year genius. Since he only needed to rebuild to the qi gathering stage, if he continued eating food of this quality, he could likely reach foundation establishment within a week. That realm would grant him another 300 years of life, providing ample time to reform his golden core. Xiang Yu watched this exchange in stunned silence. Did they really expect Elder Gua to form a foundation just by eating spirit food? Was his master truly so talented? The contrast only highlighted his own mediocrity. Despite possessing his experience doubling system, he wasn't even halfway to forming a foundation. He could only console himself by stuffing his mouth with his own cooking, suddenly feeling like the only non-genius at the table. Author's Corner. Some interesting stuff since the volume is ending. Name, Gua Shantian. Realm, Body, 12th layer. Spirit, Qi Gathering 2nd layer. Mind, Level 4. Species, Human. Spiritual Root, Superior Grade Earth. Enlightenment, Superior. Professions, Blacksmith, 9th grade. Name, Huang Fengqi. Realm, Body, 11th layer. Spirit, Core Formation 2nd layer. Mind, Level 3. Species, Human. Spiritual Root, High Grade Fire. Bloodline, Phoenix. Enlightenment, Superior. Professions, Appraiser, 7th grade. After confirming the food was working for Elder Gua, everyone finally allowed themselves to indulge. The tension that had gripped them dissolved, replaced by the simple pleasure of enjoying an extraordinary meal. Elder Huang eagerly scooped up a generous spoonful, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "You have no idea how much I've missed this," she declared. "It's been exactly 100 hours, 50 minutes, and 20 seconds since I last had Xiang Yu's cooking. If not for my high mind level, I would have gone into withdrawal and suffered qi deviation." When the first morsel touched her tongue, she froze. She had expected improvement, certainly, but this was an entirely different realm of culinary mastery. The flavors cascaded through her senses like a waterfall of pure spiritual energy. She wanted to ask how he had achieved such profound advancement in his cooking, but her hand moved with a will of its own, continuously delivering more food to her eager mouth. A warm sensation spread throughout her body as the spiritual energy permeated her meridians. This wasn't the gentle enhancement she had experienced before. This was a substantial, powerful surge. Her core swelled with qi, expanding noticeably as it filled to capacity and then pushed beyond its former boundaries. In one breathtaking moment, she broke through to the third layer of core formation realm. But Elder Huang didn't pause to savor this achievement. The food before her demanded her complete attention, and she continued eating with single-minded focus. Elder Gua ate in contemplative silence. He could feel his cultivation advancing rapidly. He had already reached the 5th layer of qi gathering and stood on the precipice of another breakthrough. His disciple's cooking was truly remarkable, far exceeding his expectations. He wondered if he had possessed this resource earlier. Could he have saved the sect master? Li Yao and the Empress were experiencing their own joyful revelations. Unlike the others, Li Yao's heavenly-grade spiritual root, coupled with the Empress's guidance, allowed her to absorb 100% of the meal's properties. She had already broken through to the 6th layer of core formation, and her core continued to fill rapidly. "This is good stuff," the Empress remarked appreciatively within Li Yao's consciousness. "I'm starting to think that I should have chosen your senior brother instead of you," she added teasingly. "Humph. Do you think you would ever have met him if not for me?" Li Yao retorted as she continued to savor each bite. For Xiang Yu himself, the experience was less dramatic. He consumed his food, pausing periodically to circulate the absorbed energy before resuming his meal. While the others experienced breakthrough after breakthrough, he simply accumulated power steadily, his medium-grade spiritual root limiting the rate at which he could process the spiritual energy. When everyone had finally finished eating, Xiang Yu extended his qi sense discreetly, assessing the results of his culinary efforts. Elder Huang had advanced from the 2nd layer of core formation to the 4th, an astounding leap that made him a little envious. This was the stark difference that superior spiritual roots made. She could advance multiple layers in a higher realm while he struggled to reach the halfway point in a much lower realm. Shifting his attention to his master, Xiang Yu noted with satisfaction that Elder Gua had progressed from a mortal state to the 7th layer of qi gathering. It seemed the rumors of his exceptional talent were true. With just a few more quality meals, he would likely rebuild his foundation, perhaps even today since it was still morning. Xiang Yu still had lunch and dinner to prepare, though perhaps not in such lavish quantities. Finally, he turned his qi sense toward Li Yao, detecting no cultivation whatsoever. Like I would believe that, he thought skeptically. Just as this thought crossed his mind, their eyes met, and she smiled knowingly at him. Xiang Yu returned the smile, inwardly acknowledging her perceptiveness. A genius is really different, he thought. She felt my qi sense instantly. Martial nephew, Elder Huang broke the comfortable silence, her gaze sharp with curiosity. "I noticed you circulating your energy earlier. Can you cultivate now?" she asked directly. Here it comes, Xiang Yu thought, but he had already prepared for this inevitable question. "I actually wanted to talk to Martial Ant about this," Xiang Yu spoke. Li Yao's eyes widened with shock. "Senior brother can cultivate?" Disbelief colored her voice as she instantly materialized beside him, her movement so swift it appeared like teleportation. Without hesitation, she placed her hand against his chest, brows furrowed in concentration. She hadn't sensed any cultivation from him earlier, but perhaps she hadn't been paying proper attention. Determined to confirm her suspicions, she decided to inject a thin stream of qi into his body to trace its path through his meridians. I wouldn't recommend that, the Empress cautioned within her mind, but the warning came too late. Li Yao had already sent a pulse of energy into Xiang Yu's body. Her expression shifted suddenly from curiosity to confusion. That's strange, I can't sense the qi I sent in anymore, she murmured, perplexed by the unusual phenomenon. Undeterred, she attempted a second injection of energy, only to gasp in pain as her own qi rebounded forcefully. Ouch, she yelped, snatching her hand away as though burned. Xiang Yu immediately reached for her withdrawn hand, concern etched across his features. Is everything okay? He asked, genuine worry in his voice. Yeah, she replied uncertainly, still nursing her tingling fingers. What was that? She asked. Hey, I told you to stop, but you didn't listen, the Empress chided within her consciousness. A resigned sigh followed. It's some sort of high-level concealment technique. Li Yao's surprise intensified at this revelation. Don't ask me about it because I don't know either, the Empress added, catching Li Yao completely off guard. This unprecedented confession from the Empress, who typically maintained an air of omniscience, left Li Yao deeply unsettled. Usually, the Empress would tell her that she couldn't answer at the moment, never admitting outright that she didn't know. What could possibly make even the Empress acknowledge that she didn't know? Actually, I managed to cultivate the 20 techniques you gave me and unlock the physique you were talking about, Xiang Yu continued. The room fell utterly silent as everyone processed his statement. Elder Huang rose swiftly from her position, excitement overtaking her as she grasped Xiang Yu's hands in her own. Is it true? Is it true? She asked breathlessly, her eyes shining with fervor. Show me, show me. Her voice trembled with barely contained enthusiasm. Xiang Yu gently extracted his hands from her eager grip, his expression turning serious. Actually, this is what I wanted to talk to you about, he began cautiously. The physique doesn't seem to be as we had expected. Elder Huang's enthusiasm dimmed slightly, replaced by confusion. What? It's not. The physique I unlocked doesn't help much in cultivation, he admitted. It just gave me a trash spiritual root. Elder Huang's expression fell at this news, her earlier excitement dimming visibly. Xiang Yu noted her reaction with satisfaction. While he'd resolved to reveal some of his abilities, he still had no intention of exposing his true power. Being perceived as too strong might lead to unwanted responsibilities and attention, exactly what he sought to avoid. But I still got something else, he added, watching as Elder Huang's interest immediately rekindled. Something else. Her eyes brightened once more, the disappointment vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. That's right, Xiang Yu confirmed. He reached into his spatial ring and extracted a sheet of paper. Closing his eyes, he channeled his concentration, focusing his spiritual energy. For several moments, nothing appeared to happen. Then gradually, intricate patterns began forming on the paper's surface, glowing softly as they etched themselves into the material. That is. Elder Huang's voice trailed off, her eyes widening in astonishment. When the process completed, she snatched the paper from his hands, examining it with the intensity of a jeweler inspecting a rare gem. A 9th-grade explosion talisman, she exclaimed, disbelief coloring her voice. That's right, Xiang Yu nodded. The physique didn't help much with cultivation, but it makes me a genius in secondary professions. That's how I was able to improve my cooking so fast. Elder Huang nodded slowly, as if pieces of a complex puzzle were finally falling into place. She quickly retrieved several papers from her own spatial ring, arranging them meticulously on the table. It makes sense now, she murmured, her focus entirely on the documents before her. No wonder, but how does this work? Her voice trailed off as she became absorbed in her analysis, seemingly forgetting everyone else's presence. Elder Gua approached Xiang Yu, leaning in confidentially. Your martial aunt is a researcher, he explained with a bemused smile. She sometimes enters trances like this, so don't mind her. Xiang Yu nodded. Suddenly, Elder Gua's expression shifted as realization dawned. Wait, you can make talismans? Was it you that caused that huge explosion? Xiang Yu scratched his cheek awkwardly. Yeah, it was probably me, he admitted sheepishly. I'll go bury the hole. Elder Guo wrapped an arm around Xiang Yu's shoulders, his laughter filling the room. Haha, you can do that later. His grip tightened affectionately as pride swelled within him. To think that his disciple had created the powerful explosion that had disrupted the demon authority, indirectly saving him in the process. Ah, I've figured it out now. Elder Huang suddenly exclaimed, emerging from her scholarly trance. The scrolls say that the one who can unlock this physique will be at the top of the world, she announced, her voice charged with academic excitement. But they don't state how. Everyone's attention focused on her as she continued her explanation. To the untrained ear, this might sound like being the strongest. After all, in a cultivation world, being the top of the world typically means being the most powerful, she elaborated, pacing slightly as she laid out her theory. But not in this instance. A satisfied smile spread across her face as she reached her conclusion. What this scroll means is being top of the world, literally. In a cultivation world, being top of the world could also mean being above the cultivators themselves, she declared triumphantly. And who's above cultivators? Alchemists, weapon refiners, formation masters. She gestured excitedly towards Xiang Yu. If you have mastery in all these professions, you can be considered above cultivators since they need these resources to grow stronger. Now it makes sense that the requirements are high comprehension, such as indeed needed to master so many professions. Everyone nodded in apparent understanding, seemingly satisfied with her explanation. Is what she's saying true? Li Yao asked the Empress privately. Probably. I haven't researched that physique all that much. It was considered a myth where I came from, the Empress replied. Despite her response, the Empress harbored deeper suspicions. The explanation sounded logical, but something still felt missing. There was no way cultivators in the immortal realm would pursue this physique merely for secondary profession benefits. While such skills might indeed place one above others in the mortal world, the dynamics were entirely different in the immortal realm, where natural treasures were typically valued over refined ones. Was she overthinking? Probably not. Her gaze drifted towards Xiang Yu, sensing that the mystery likely centered on him specifically. However, seeing no immediate reason to voice her suspicions, she kept these thoughts to herself for now. In the Wuming cult, the sect master sat alone, his face contorted with shock and disbelief. His fingers gripped the armrest of his throne so tightly that the black jade began to crack beneath his strength. How is this possible? He whispered to the empty hall, his voice teetering between rage and bewilderment. Mei Ziyuan, my masterpiece, defeated? The notion seemed absurd, inconceivable. At full power, Mei Ziyuan's strength rivaled that of a late-stage golden core cultivator. With his regeneration abilities, not even peak golden core cultivators should have been able to harm him. How could a small-time sect like the Azure Cloud Sword sect possess a nascent soul realm cultivator? His mind raced through possibilities, reconstructing his careful plans that had now crumbled to dust. He had discovered a hidden treasure trove of a demonic faction expert from the past, a fortuitous encounter that had changed the trajectory of his life. There, he had first learned about the demon god and used the resources he'd found to establish himself as the cult leader. For years, countless, painstaking years, he had traced the whereabouts of the demon ceiling tower. He had sacrificed, schemed, and waited patiently. And when success was finally within his grasp, this unforeseen disaster struck. His expression hardened as a thought came to mind. The Orthodox faction, he hissed, eyes narrowing with suspicion. They must be scheming against me. It made perfect sense. The Orthodox faction must have secretly aided the Azure Cloud Sword sect. How else could such an inconsequential sect have triumphed against his chosen disciple? This wasn't a coincidence, it was a conspiracy. Slowly, an evil grin spread across his features. Since that's how they want to play, he whispered, a dark chuckle rising from his throat, they shouldn't blame me for being ruthless. His laughter echoed through the empty hall. In the immortal realm, a beautiful young woman strolled through an exquisite field where high-grade herbs that mortal cultivators would kill for grew as mere decorative plants. She approached an open lake, though calling it merely a lake would be a grave understatement. This was a massive spirit spring being used casually as a lake. Its surface shimmered with multicolored energy, occasionally releasing wisps of pure spiritual essence into the air. At the edge of this extraordinary body of water sat an elderly man, fishing rod in hand, his expression serene and detached from worldly concerns. Despite his apparent age, an unmistakable aura of immeasurable power emanated from him. "Uncle, have you got it yet?" the young woman asked, her melodious voice carrying both respect and impatience. The old man didn't turn to look at her. "Not yet. The heavenly records seem to have disappeared," he replied, his voice calm. "You know that I really need this flame, right?" She stepped closer, her perfectly composed face showing a hint of urgency. "It's the only way I can increase my power to compete with the other geniuses from rival factions. Do you want our heavenly palace to be looked down upon?" The elder man simply stroked his beard, internally sighing at youth's eternal haste. Kids these days, he thought to himself. Without warning, he flicked his wrist, sending a small object arcing through the air toward her. "That's the last known location of the flame. You can start from there," he stated, immediately returning his attention to his fishing as if she had already departed. The young woman caught the object with perfect grace. After examining it carefully, she bowed respectfully and turned to leave. "It's hard to pry into matters related to the heavenly Tao," the old man murmured to himself once she had gone. "Even someone like me, who should be able to investigate heavenly secrets, remains restricted." His gaze drifted across the shimmering waters, concern briefly crossing his ancient features. "I hope the other party is just using a treasure to conceal their destiny. Otherwise..." His musings were suddenly interrupted as his fishing rod bent sharply. "Oh, I caught something," he exclaimed, his face lighting up with childlike delight as he reeled in his catch. After the feast, Elder Huang and Elder Guo departed together for a sect meeting at the Celestial Summit Hall. Xiang Yu understood why, following such a tumultuous event, they needed to discuss the sect's future and select a new leader. None of this concerned him, though. He reflected as he placed the final support beam and stepped back to survey his handiwork. The house hadn't suffered extensive damage, making repairs relatively straightforward. Still, he made a mental note to study formations soon. He needed better protection for his home. Having it blown apart every time a fight broke out was becoming tedious. Fortunately, his martial aunt had promised to find him some secondary profession manuals, so that particular worry was resolved. She was truly considerate, caring not only for their master but for him as well. He sincerely hoped the old man wouldn't fumble her. "Senior brother, are you done?" Li Yao's voice came suddenly from behind him. Xiang Yu jumped slightly, startled by her silent approach. Li Yao giggled at his reaction, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "This girl is nearly as skilled as me at concealment," he thought to himself. She moved without presence, materializing out of nowhere like a phantom. It was fortunate she was a nice girl. Such abilities could be terrifying in the hands of someone with bad intentions. Li Yao smiled warmly at Xiang Yu. She thought to herself that her senior brother looked really handsome when he worked. She had been observing him work for quite some time without his notice, admiring his focused expression and movements. Catching herself staring, she quickly brushed those thoughts aside. "Senior brother, I got something for you," she announced, reaching for her spatial ring. So much had happened that she hadn't found the opportunity to present him with her reward from clearing the tower. Upon exiting the heaven-testing pagoda, she had received multiple treasures, though few held significant value. The most precious items were drops of both dragon and phoenix bloodline essence. Since the phoenix seemed more feminine in nature, she had initially planned to keep it for herself and give the dragon bloodline to her senior brother. Bloodlines were renowned as powerful cultivation assets. Those with rare lineages advanced more rapidly and might even unlock ancient inheritances upon reaching certain thresholds. "You want to take the Phoenix bloodline?" the Empress suddenly inquired within her consciousness. "Yes, should I not?" Li Yao responded mentally. Although the bloodline of mythical creatures like the Phoenix is great, it's harder to improve, and you might be treated as an outsider by both sides by being half, the Empress cautioned. "I'll help you unlock my human emperor bloodline instead. It's not much weaker than the mythical bloodlines anyway." Li Yao considered this advice carefully. It made perfect sense. A human emperor bloodline would be more compatible, especially with the Empress herself providing guidance on enhancing it. The choice seemed obvious now. "Can my brother learn it as well?" she asked hopefully. "No," came the Empress's flat response. "Why not?" Li Yao pressed. "Everyone has their own destiny. This is yours," the Empress stated with finality. Li Yao suspected the Empress was merely being cryptic again. "Just you wait," she thought defiantly. "If I learn it, do you think you can prevent me from teaching him?" The Empress, not having achieved her status without extraordinary perception, clearly sensed Li Yao's thoughts, but she didn't think much of it. After all, there could only be one human emperor in a generation. "Why don't you give him both bloodlines instead? With his comprehension, he might be able to create something extraordinary," she suggested, smoothly changing the subject. "Something extraordinary?" Li Yao's interest was immediately piqued. "Is it possible to have multiple bloodlines simultaneously?" "Who knows?" the Empress responded before retreating into Li Yao's spiritual sea. Li Yao could only sigh at the Empress's enigmatic behavior. She always maintained this air of mystery, revealing just enough to tantalize without providing complete answers. Still, Li Yao smiled knowingly. Luckily, she was smart and figured out what the Empress was implying. The Empress was suggesting that Xiang Yu might indeed be capable of absorbing both bloodlines. With that possibility in mind, she resolved to give him both precious essences. She placed 2 small crystal vials into her senior brother's open palms. "These are drops of phoenix and dragon blood," Li Yao explained, her eyes bright with excitement. "If you refine them, you can obtain their bloodlines." Reaching into her pouch, she withdrew a manual that caught Xiang Yu's attention immediately. Unlike the typical cultivation texts, ancient, weathered scrolls with faded characters, this one appeared pristine, as if freshly created and never before opened. "Here, take this," she said, carefully placing the manual atop the vials in his hands. "This is the high-grade ice palm technique." She tilted her head slightly in thought. "You said your spiritual root is the low 5 elements, right?" Xiang Yu nodded, curious where this was leading. Although having multiple elements might seem like a disadvantage, it also has its own advantages, she continued, her voice taking on an instructional tone. "With your comprehension, it shouldn't be hard for you to grasp an ice element technique from your water element." He nodded again, keeping his thoughts hidden behind a grateful smile. This truly was the world of geniuses, he reflected silently. She casually mentioned it shouldn't be hard, when in reality, developing mutated elements from basic ones represented a significant challenge for most cultivators. What Li Yao dismissed as simple would be an insurmountable obstacle for many. Of course, with his transcendent Dao physique, refining any type of energy came naturally to him. Still, he appreciated her thoughtfulness in providing this rare technique. He had been wondering how to acquire ice element techniques, and now she had solved that problem effortlessly. All that remained were the wind element and perhaps light and dark, though those last two seemed beyond reach for now. Light element techniques were exceedingly rare due to the element scarcity. As for dark, while many demonic sect disciples utilized similar energies, they typically wielded corrupted demonic power that merely resembled true dark element rather than the pure form itself. Finding authentic dark element techniques would prove challenging, as most were likely classified as forbidden demonic arts. For the moment, he would set aside that pursuit. As these thoughts circulated through his mind, Li Yao suddenly retrieved a glowing wooden plank from her pocket. The inscription upon it pulsed with a soft light. "The master is calling me," she announced, already turning to leave. "Make sure to practice the technique well." With those parting words, she activated her movement technique and soared away, her form blurring as she disappeared into the distance. In the Celestial Summit Hall, all the elders of the Azure Cloud sect had gathered to address the urgent matters facing their order. The chamber held a solemn atmosphere as 9 senior cultivators arranged themselves around the grand table. Elder Feng Wuying of the Blade Pavilion, who also served as Grand Elder, Elder Zhao Lu Feng of the Ethereal Wind Pavilion, Elder Guo Shantian of the Mountain Heart Pavilion, Elder Su Yihan of the Reflection Pavilion, Elder Lei Jumming of the Thundering Echo Pavilion, Elder Wu Tiangang of the Spirit Forging Pavilion, Elder Jiang Qingxin of the Meditation Pavilion, Elder Lu Shuiwei of the Flowing Water Pavilion, and Elder Huang Fingqi of the Phoenix Ascension Pavilion. "Let's start with the most important part. We need a new sect leader," Elder Su Yihan spoke, breaking the heavy silence that had settled over the hall. Elder Guo was about to speak, but the Grand Elder placed a hand on his shoulder, shaking his head gently. "We all know that you and the sect master were sworn brothers, but the sect cannot remain without a leader," he said. "Even if it has not even been a day, we still have to do this. This isn't a clan, but a sect. We have to look out for everyone's best interests." Elder Guo nodded reluctantly. Though it pained him to select a new sect leader when his brother's corpse was not yet cold, he understood the necessity. The sect still had enemies. Though they had won this battle, they had not yet won the war. Who should we select as the new sect leader? Elder Huang asked, her gaze sweeping across the assembled elders. All eyes turned toward the Grand Elder expectantly. But to their surprise, he simply shook his head. "Let you youngsters decide among yourselves," he said with finality. "I'll also be stepping down from my position as the Grand Elder." Shocked murmurs rippled through the hall, but the Grand Elder raised his palm to quiet them. "I only stayed to look after my friend's son, but it seems I couldn't accomplish even that." His voice carried no self-pity, merely stating a fact that pained him deeply. The elders listened in respectful silence. The Grand Elder belonged to the previous sect master's generation, not their own. His next words fell heavily in the quiet chamber. "I'm growing old. I'll enter retreat to see if I can break through to the Golden Core stage." A pause. "If I can't, I'll just join my brothers." Everyone understood the meaning behind his words. If he failed to achieve this breakthrough, his natural lifespan would expire, and he would pass from this world. "I have someone to recommend for the position, though," the Grand Elder continued, noticing the somber mood that had descended upon the gathering. "I recommend Elder Guo's disciple, Li Yao." When they heard this suggestion, heads nodded in unison. Many had harbored the same thought, but hesitated to voice it. Coming from the Grand Elder, however, the recommendation carried significant weight. They had all witnessed Li Yao's overwhelming power during the recent battle. Having her as sect leader would provide a powerful beacon of strength to inspire confidence among the disciples. Their only reservation concerned the considerable generation gap. All eyes turned to Elder Guo, seeking his reaction. "My disciple is not even 50 years old," Elder Guo objected firmly. "Why should she carry the burden of the sect?" "Elder Guo, don't be so harsh," Elder Wu Tiangang countered. "She's also an adult. I'm sure she'll understand the sect's situation." Elder Guo gritted his teeth in frustration. These people wanted to push all responsibility onto a youngster. Had they no shame? Although Li Yao possessed remarkable strength, she remained, in his eyes, just a child. Suddenly, Elder Huang placed her gentle hand on his shoulder. "How about this? We can ask her directly. If she doesn't agree, then we'll have to abandon the idea," she suggested. The other elders nodded in approval, seemingly satisfied with this compromise. "Fine." Elder Guo relented with a sigh as he retrieved a wooden communication plank from his sleeve, its surface glowing faintly with energy as he activated it. When Li Yao arrived at the gathering in the Celestial Summit Peak Hall, several elders rose to their feet, greeting her with the respectful address typically reserved for equals rather than disciples. "Greetings, fellow Taoist Li," they said with measured deference. "These people are truly shameless," Elder Guo thought, watching his colleagues' transparent attempts to curry favor. Yet, even as irritation flickered through him, understanding followed. For the sect to survive in these perilous times, they desperately needed a powerful leader. His only reservation was whether Li Yao possessed the right temperament to shoulder such a burden. She stood in her prime, a once-in-a-generation talent with boundless potential. In his heart, Elder Guo firmly believed she had the makings of an immortal. Given sufficient time and freedom, she would undoubtedly ascend to shake the very heavens themselves. But the sect now bore the ominous mark of the high-level woman cult. An ordinary disciple might simply flee when the inevitable storm broke, but a sect master would be honor-bound to stand firm, even if it meant going down with the sect. Li Yao, the Grand Elder, addressed her directly, his weathered voice carrying across the chamber. "Are you interested in becoming the sect master?" Surprise flashed across Li Yao's face. Clearly, she hadn't anticipated this when summoned to the elders' gathering. Her gaze swept across the chamber, taking in the expectant expressions turned toward her, some hopeful, others calculating, all intensely focused on her response. "You needn't feel pressured," Elder Guo interjected, his tone gentle yet firm. "Just follow your heart. No one will dare blame you, regardless of your decision." Beside him, Elder Huang offered an encouraging smile. Within Li Yao's consciousness, the Empress's voice resonated with measured caution. "What will you choose? If you become the sect leader, You'll be mortal enemies with the Wuming cult. Li Yao surveyed the assembly once more, noting the mingled hope and desperation in their eyes. Though she could certainly flee, her power now sufficient to establish herself anywhere, such an act ran counter to her fundamental nature. With so many looking to her for salvation, how could she possibly abandon them? Besides, victory and defeat remained uncertain. The future had yet to be written. Drawing herself to her full height, Li Yao nodded decisively. "I will fight for our sect," she declared, her voice ringing with unwavering conviction. The Grand Elder's weathered face creased into a satisfied smile. "What?" Elder Guo's shock escaped as an audible exclamation. How could his typically carefree, mischievous disciple agree to such a restrictive role? He had been certain she would decline. Before he could process this unexpected development, the other elders rose from their seats in a synchronous motion, bowing formally to their new leader. "We greet the sect master," they intoned in unified respect. Elder Guo glanced around the chamber, bewilderment giving way to resignation. He released a soft sigh, perhaps he truly was growing old. If she wished to remain and shoulder this burden, what could he do? In truth, beneath his concern lurked a flicker of pride. She had chosen the path of responsibility rather than self-preservation. He had truly chosen his disciples well. Noticing that every eye in the chamber had turned expectantly toward him, Elder Guo composed himself. A small smile softened his features as he too inclined his head in formal acknowledgement. "I greet the sect master." I wonder what master would think, he thought reflectively. He was deeply disappointed when the sect genius of our generation declined to become sect master. But this sect genius has raised an even greater talent who now takes up the mantle. I hope master won't be too disappointed that it took this long.